327 of the Plane Talking UK podcast. I'm Carlos, and in this week's extra special show, we are joined by Ariel Tweto to talk about the challenges of life and flying in Alaska. We update you on the big stories hitting the aviation news wires this week. In today's Plane Truth, we find out why the window shades need to be open for takeoff and landing, and Sean Van Hatten chats to us about being a test pilot. So joining me this week, as always, in a very hot and stuffy PTUK studios, pressing all the right buttons, it's of course Matt Smith.
I'll bring my fader up, shall I? Hello everyone, you're right. It is no, it is definitely Ward here. Have you got your screen there to show everyone what the temperature here is?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, guys.
It's dropped.
It's hold on, this side, 26.9 degrees Celsius. I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but
yeah,
it's
a lot, enough. Yeah.
for the UK, that's a really good summer.
It is. That's not bad going at all, is it? That is not bad going. So, are you missing the studio, Carlos?
I'm missing being in the studio with you, Matt. I'll tell you, it's nice to be here, and it's nice to have access to regular beers, but nothing beats...
Are you saying my drink service is not good enough? Is that what you're trying to say?
Not at all.
Rude.
But it's a bit different. It's nice to have, when we're both sitting side by side, and it's a bit more fun when we're all together.
Well, that's true, absolutely. 89 Fahrenheit, apparently. Lane has just done a conversion for us, so there we are.
Okay.
He just
89.
did that in his head and everything. He's well posh.
That sounds hotter than 26. Anyway.
It does, yeah.
Yeah, I know. So, Nev, unfortunately, can't be with us this week. He is off on his holidays, sunning himself I think he's in Scotland, isn't he, Matt?
Yes, I think so. He's gone away with Mrs. Nev, hasn't he?
Mrs. Nev, yeah. He's hopefully buying us all a lovely stick of rock from Scotland, so we'll have that in next week's show. But joining us, as always, from his studio in Charlotte is, of course, the fantastic Armando.
Hey, guys. Always happy to be here live. This week was kind of a regular week. I spent the beginning of the week flying my regular route out of Atlanta Hartsfield, and other than that, I've actually got 2 weeks off of work now. So like I told you guys, my hours got reduced a little bit, much like everybody else in the industry. So my family and I took a family camping trip out into the wilds. True wild camping. No facilities. The girls did great. We literally walked in about 45 minutes ago.
Oh, wow.
So, but we got here, and I am so excited about today's show.
As we
probably more excited than I've been in a long time, but I'm ready. I'm ready for it.
All right, I'm slightly offended, but all right. Anyway, whatever.
So we're going to thank everyone who's joined us in the live YouTube chat room this evening. All the usual family members in there. Just going to run through a few of our family members in there. So we've got Alex Robinson. Hello to you, Dr. Steph, Auntie Liz in Canada. We've got Richard Adams, Lane Street, just scrolling down. Hope so. Miss Tony S. Hello to you, Tony S. Paul Tricker, one of our local listeners. Jenny in Rome. Hello to you, Jenny. Hope things are warm in Rome. Graham Haley, our ATC controller from here in the UK. Alex Robinson. I'm just scrolling to make sure I don't miss anyone. And Airliners Live. Ooh. Hello to you, Airliners Live. Andy, hello to you. And a big hello to everyone who's joined us in the live YouTube chat room this evening. So don't forget, if you haven't already done it and you are watching us on YouTube, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit the bell icon, which is right next to it. And you'll be notified when we are live and recording new episodes, because we'd love to have you in the chat room.
Oh, yeah.
So the competition, don't forget as well, the competition that we're running at the moment to win that £150 voucher to spend in the Plane Reclaimers store, very kindly donated by Andrew Keegan in episode 324. Just send us some of your Aviation in My Life feedback, either via email or audio or video. You can send in as well. If you can send it in to us, the usual email address, podcast@planetalkinguk.com. We'd love to hear from you all about aviation in your life. And then we're going to put your names in a hat, draw them out, and you could be in with a chance of winning that £150 voucher, which is pretty damn awesome. So joining us on this week's show, we have two very special guests indeed. And obviously, we have to have ladies first. Obviously,
those are the rules.
We are very British, you see, and obviously we have to be very, very good, very, very good. But joining us on the show this week She is the star of the Flying Wild Alaska series that was broadcast on the Discovery Channel not so long back. So we welcome onto the show, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce Ariel Tweto.
Hello. Hi. Well, first off, my dad will be so ticked if you say I'm the star of the show. He's like, I'm the star of the show. That's how he introduces himself now. He's like, my name's Jim Tweto, star of Flying Wild Alaska. I've actually heard him say that before. But yeah, well, so good to be here. Thank you, guys. And my camera's probably really crooked.
The viewers love you, Ariel.
It's fine. That is a beautiful location. So tell us about where you are.
So I'm actually in Laguna Beach right now, California. And I'm staying with the family, the director of a new movie that I just shot. And the new movie's called Into America's Wild. I filmed it with the first Native American astronaut, and it's me and him going across America and just goofing off and getting kids back in nature. And I got to learn how to surf and kiteboard and mountain bike and all this stuff. And so super fun project. It premiered a week before the theaters closed down.
Oh wow!
So we're
timing there, yeah.
Perfect timing. It sucks because I was supposed to go to like 60 different countries for the premiere.
Oh wow!
And so it's all postponed. And so I think we are going to like Ireland, Scotland, somewhere like London.
Oh cool!
All over to promote it once this all ends, because it's going to end.
Oh, absolutely. Well, do make sure you let us know when you're in the UK. Let us know, and we'll come and buy you a beer. There you are. Look.
Yes.
What about two?
Yeah. All right. Yes, that's fine. Yeah, I'm sure the PT UK coffers can stretch that. We're actually going to come back to your latest project later on. We've actually got the trailer to play out, which we're looking forward to sharing with everyone. So we'll come back to that a bit later on.
So joining us as well, we have another star guest. I know this show is just, we're going to have to have at least a 10-hour show this week. Joining us this week as well with another equally amazing background. It is the legend that is Sean Van Hatten. Hello to you, Sean.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, now, everybody's trying to one-up us this week, aren't they, with their backgrounds? So tell me about this beautiful aircraft that's just behind you there, Sean.
Yeah, so I'm here. Most of the work I've been doing recently has been with Stratos aircraft here in Redmond, Oregon. And behind me here is the proof of concept airplane that we did. Airplane first flew in 2016, I think it was. November 2016. We put about 250 hours of flight test time on it in the past 4 years, and we actually just did the first flight, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, first flight on the new prototype 716X, which is down in another hangar I just ran up here from. So,
wow. Oh. It definitely looks very, very clean and shiny. I will say, Sean.
Fortunately, it's about 6-7 feet away, so you can't see the inch layer of dust over the top of it. But yeah, it certainly looks shiny from where it is right now. So.
For the moment, anyway. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh.
We all have lives.
We all.
Sorry, guys. I have kids running in here. They're going to be out in a second.
No, that's all good.
That's fine. That's
absolutely
fine.
It's awesome.
Normally, I have a cat sort of running in and out of here, Ariel, and then Matt normally has a dog running in and out of his studio.
Usual
I also have a 6-year-old and 2 dogs, which are always trying to, go at the microphone at the same time. So,
anyway, right, okay.
So kids are out.
Yeah.
So just
all good.
So just
we're gonna see, for those of you guys watching on the YouTube feed, you're gonna see 2 little kids running into the beach and the surf in the background. Parenting 101.
So before we move on with our talk with Ariel, just a quick note for everyone who's watching. This show is going to be just a little bit different to how it normally would play out each week. We're going to have a chat with Ariel first, and then we're going to do a slight bit of news and bits and pieces with the highlights of what's been going on this week, with a few stories we've picked out. And then we're going to have a chat with Sean at the end of the show, with a few other little segments in the middle to sort of pad out things with the plane truce, and also some ads as well. But moving swiftly on, we're going to have a chat with you, Ariel, if that's okay. We're going to obviously admire the view behind you. But
I know, I'm so jealous.
So, Ariel, obviously, again, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. And so basically, obviously, we all saw the series on Discovery. I know I absolutely, me and Armando thoroughly enjoyed the series. It's absolutely amazing. But your family has arguably done more than anyone to promote aviation in Alaska. So how did the whole show sort of come out? How did the Discovery Channel kind of approach you guys? Was it, was someone came and saw you one day and...
So no, it's actually a way different story, and a lot of people don't know this. So I actually went to school for TV and film production, and in California, and so I did a little show on ABC called Wipeout. It was a big competition show, and so on that show, I got in like second place, and then they invited me back and like 2 more times to compete. And I just kept breaking things and then having a blast. And they were like, oh, yay, this is... But then I fell in love with... I'm like, people do this for a living? People, like... I want to keep making TV shows. So I met a guy on the show. He was our safety coordinator. And he had just been to Alaska. And Deadliest Catch just came out. So me and him, we were like, hey, my family's interesting. My dad runs an airline. Everyone in my family, they're all pilots. I was like, let's do a show about my family. So me and him, I think I was 20, we pitched it to all over Fox, ABC, NBC, Discovery, and it took like a year to pitch. And then, and I didn't really tell my parents about it. And we just sort of, a film crew showed up, and my dad was like, why aren't you in college? And then we started filming for like 3.5 years. But yeah, so me and a friend actually created it.
That's pretty awesome that your daughter that's in college just shows up with a film crew to you, to your house and your company.
Well, he didn't think it was that awesome at first. They're like, our family's really not that interesting. Like, we're just like everybody else. We're pretty like just a normal family. And so, yeah, he didn't think it would work. And after though, a couple of the film crew lived with my parents after the show ended. We all became this big family, and everyone just like loved my parents. So they were like, can we just live with you guys for a while? And that
was actually one of my questions is once it got pitched and they showed up with the rigs and the lights and the microphones and the cameras, how did that go? Was it disruptive to the operation? Was it kind of what we would all envision, like this big film crew, or was it like just a couple guys with cameras and microphones?
So ours was, it was pretty big. So in our, so we had 3 bases. It was in Unalakleet, where my family's from, and then we had another crew in Bethel, and then another one in Nome. And it just depends on who had the coolest story of the day. And so, and so we had probably 15 to 20 people on our crew. But then in our little airport, it would be maybe 5 people, 2 cameras, 2 producers, and then a sound guy. And so for the first week, it was a little weird. It's always weird having a camera right in your face, especially if you're having a bad day, or if you're tired, or we had a couple episodes where some people passed away. And so in those moments, you're I just want to be by myself, get the camera away. But as a producer, you're like, no, get a camera in front of your face. So it took a little while to get used to, but after that, you forget they're there.
Well, that's pretty cool. Carlos, did you have one?
Yeah. So obviously Alaska can be quite a harsh environment to obviously fly in. We have snow in this country, but as me and Matt know, we get about 3 flakes of snow, and that is about all we can manage.
That doesn't count as snow. It doesn't snow in England.
No. So
no, we don't get snow. We don't get snow in England. We get snow.
Snow. Yeah, snow. That's all we get. Yeah. So what are some of the craziest stories you've heard or experienced? Obviously, with the whole environment of flying in Alaska.
Well, it's always, where I'm from, we're right on the coast, right on the Bering Sea. So it's always windy. It's and so just the crosswind landings are always insane. My dad could land on one of the runways. He could land when he's coming into the wind when it's blowing 45, 50 knots. It looks like he's going backwards. We'll watch him. We're like, no way, he's going to do this. And it's seriously, he looks like a helicopter. It just drops. But wow. So the wind's always crazy, and then the weather changes in an instant. It could be sunny like this, and then in a minute, fog. So I would say the weather is just pretty insane. The one good thing that I love about flying in Alaska is you don't really have like airspace. Like you could be flying in the middle of nowhere and, well, FAA, whatever, they could hear this one, but you could be flying like 20 feet above the tundra and just be like, whoa, this is amazing. But there's no cities, no villages around you for hundreds and hundreds of miles. And so you're not constantly on the radio. You don't have to constantly be like looking for other planes coming in. And like flying here near LAX is crazy. I'll be flying in this little experimental plane, and then below you are like jumbo jets coming in, and you're like, whoa, this is nuts. So I actually think it's way scarier flying in California than in Alaska, just because I'm not used to the radio communication that goes on. And I love to talk, so it's weird that like the thing that scares me about flying is talking on the radio.
Yeah, and Sean, feel free to jump in. Sean Van Hatten is probably flown all kinds of different places. Have you ever flown up in Alaska, Sean?
Yeah, I've been to Alaska several times. The first time was we were doing we took 6 Epic LTs around the world, and we came through. We actually originally we were going to go into Petropavlovsk and then go over to Adak and then Anchorage. But when we were coming out of Petro, the weather was terrible in Adak, so we actually jumped back to Magadan and then shot over Anadyr up into Nome, landed into Nome. And then cleared customs there and kept on going. The next trip I had was really crazy. It was about a year and a half later, or 2 years later. I took a Pitts S2B from Seattle, Washington to Anchorage over the Alcan Highway, picked up a Pitts S2A-E, and then ferried that back down the Alcan Highway. And then 2 weeks later, went back up to Anchorage, picked up that original Pitts, and they came back down. Which involved all kinds of shenanigans because there's not quite enough fuel for a Pitts to actually make it all the way, and like putting jerry cans in the front seat, strapping them in, and landing, questionably legally at some gravel strips in Canada. Yeah, all kinds of fun stuff.
So, Ariel, when you were flying up there and filming this, so you had already lived in California. So I think every pilot, every aviator has this just amazing dream of what flying in Alaska is like. I mean, we all want to be a bush pilot for like a week.
For like a day.
Yeah. And there's actually a place in, I think it's Ireland, or maybe it's in Scotland, that they do the bush pilot experience for 1 week. You get to fly a Cub on big tires and go land in some gravel strips. I'm sure it's very safe and pre-planned. Yeah. But did you know at the time, like what a dream this was for every pilot out there?
No, I didn't, because I grew up with it, and it is not glamorous. I mean, me and my sisters were the one loading my dad's plane. So you're loading like triple mailers of pop. It's like those things are heavy, and it's -50, and you're loading eggs, dropping eggs. My parents are yelling at us. Like I was at like just it's just cold, and you're trying to get in as quick as you can and load as fast as you can. So for me, like, yeah, I didn't think other people like had this dream of doing it until our show. I'm like, what? People actually want to come up and move from like Florida to Alaska and be like flying this like treacherous weather. But I think it's super cool. Like, it's awesome that people from all over the world have been interested in like the lifestyle that we live. And it is like, I mean, you do get a big sense of like gratification from doing it, because you're helping the people out in rural Alaska. The only way in and out of our village is by airplane. So you're taking people that are sick, you're bringing people their mail, you're bringing people food. And so you do get a big sense of like pride by like flying for remote airlines.
Wow. Yeah. A little bit of feedback actually from somebody in the chat room here. So Marie ZP says, that was a great story of how the show got started, Ariel. We miss watching you and your family. Isn't that nice?
Oh. Thank you. And I should give a shout out to the creator, Tommy Baynard. He was the guy that I met on Wipeout. And he was like super cool guy, and he just believed that we had a great story to tell. And and so me and him pitched it and got it going. But yeah, a lot of people don't know that, and it's not like I'm not going to take credit for it, but then it was just a good collaboration between like our family and Tommy.
So speaking of like a great story, and I think, okay, so your dad would get mad if we said that you were the star of the show, but everybody loved watching Ariel, and your oh my gosh, your positive attitude when things were just going crazy. But I think one of the most memorable points in the show was your first flight with John Ponce. Like, and I think Matt's going to play out that a little snippet of that video, but do you still remember that day? And what was that like?
The solo flight, yeah.
My solo flight or my first flight with Ponce?
That was your first flight with John is, I think, what Matt's going to play out.
I'll be honest, I watched half of our first, like our premiere, and then I went to the bar. Because I can't watch myself on TV. I watched it for like 10 minutes, and I'm like, that's how I talk. That's how I walk. It looks like I have to constantly use the bathroom. And then so after that, our producers were like, you're not allowed to watch any of these episodes because you just rip yourself apart. So I don't know how they cut any of the episodes. People are like, you did this. I'm like, oh yeah, I did do that. And then so I flying with Ponce though, like, man, the best instructor. He made me so comfortable. He is like a brother. He became like one of my best friends. And he was just so patient with me. You have to, to teach this thing right here, like how to fly, it takes a lot of patience. And then like part of me, I do goof off a lot, but then he was like, hey, you have to like calm down, like be a little mature. Like, let's get in this together. And he would help me. We would go to these sandbars, and then we would bring all my study books. And because if I'm around people, like I get FOMO really bad, and I have to constantly be in conversations, and I want to go play with everyone. And so he would literally remove me from civilization and be like, okay, we're going to sit down on the sandbar, just me and you, and let's get through this chapter. And so, like, it was definitely because of Ponce that I got my license and actually got through ground school and everything.
Oh, that's the exact opposite experience of every private pilot who, not in a sandbar, had to sit in some 8-foot by 8-foot 1947 built room with a bunch of cut-off solo T-shirts with old Cheetos in the corner.
Well, if you would have stuck me in a room with a bunch of guys, I would have been like passing love letters to all of them, and I would have missed like all my like studies. so yeah, you have to. I know my strengths and my weaknesses, and definitely one of my weaknesses is just being around people and chatting too much. And I just love, and that's why I love like making TV and films, is because you're constantly learning about different ways of living and different cultures, and it blows my mind how like different people are, but how similar we all are at the same time. And I don't know, but yeah, flying with Ponce, so fun.
Yeah.
So while obviously the airline era, Alaska, when you were there, obviously you said earlier you were kind of loading like loads of stuff onto aircraft and so the light aircraft and stuff. What was one of the most craziest things you ever had to load onto an aircraft?
Ooh, that's a hard one. We were constantly loading like just dogs and animals, coffins, which isn't that exciting. You know what? Like a big one that people started to do. We have like one restaurant in Northwest Alaska, like in our area, which is a pizza place. So people from different villages would order pizza, and then this would turn out to be like $100 pizza. I'm like, really? You guys want pizza that bad? But yeah, and so I
know how they feel. I'll be honest.
Yeah. But yeah, we didn't. I mean, you're loading essentials. There was a crap ton of diapers, a lot of pop, a lot of Doritos, a lot of ramen, a lot of milk, a lot of eggs. And I'm sorry if you're watching this and I dropped all your eggs, because that happened a lot. But just a lot of essentials that people need. So there wasn't really a lot of things that we were like, that's really weird. And I'm sure if it was weird, they had it wrapped up, and I didn't break those rules. I never looked in people's luggage and stuff. And so there were times where I could like jiggle boxes and like, I know what's in here, but couldn't open it.
There was an episode, Ariel, that you were in where you were on, I think it was one of your first solo flights, and the way the episode show it and stuff, I think you had a lot of crosswind when you were landing, and you're on your own, and it was really tense. You know, you're watching the program on telly, like, oh my God, Ariel, was it really as
it was worse. It was worse. Well, one, they had my mom mic'd on the ground, and that's if you rewatch that part, because I did watch a little solo clip on YouTube, but the whole time it's just beep 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 because my mom is going crazy. And so I was doing my solo flight, so 3 takeoff and landings. My first 2, I was like, I can do this. Like, this is awesome. This is so cool. I'm in the plane by myself. Like what a feeling to be like, okay, I have my life in my hands. My dad can't come up here and rescue me. My mom can't come in and like console me. Like, this is me. Like, I have to do this. And so, the first 2 were great. I'm coming around for the second one or the third land, or I think I was like, I just took off and I was coming up, and then I was turning downwind, and then my radios died. Like something, like my radios quit working, and then the wind switched. And so and then you just get frazzled. So I didn't know what was going on. I'm like, why am I drifting so far away from like the runway? Why is it so far away now? I'm like, oh crap. And I'm trying to figure out how to get my radios working. And so I go and I tried to land, couldn't get to the runway. Like, I just, like, I was like, I cannot land this thing. So I went around again, and then I'm sweating, and I'm just like, oh crap, this is not good. And so like I come in, and I was just like, it's getting windier, so I'm just gonna lay this baby down. And so I go, like, I'm just like, and I'm just like crabbing almost, and then I'm just like, crap. And in the footage, though, I close my eyes. I'm just like, and then I'm like, oh my God. But then oh my God, the best feeling in the world was when it just like bounced, and then it was like, okay, not gonna like ruin this plane. I'm still alive. I'm still here. Like, and then, so that was scary. And that definitely humbled me, because those first 2, I was like, I got this. This is super easy. Why do people make such a big deal about it? And then that third one, I was like, oh geez, like, this is not good. So that was a little scary, but and so it was definitely not planned. And the producers were like, yeah, you want to go up and do a couple more? We need to get some other shots. And I'm like, nope, I am done for the day. Like, I need to go and like wipe the sweat off of everything, and let's do something else.
You know, what's funny is I think you just stole Sean's thunder, because Sean was going to talk to us about one of his maydays that he had as a Reno air race pilot. But Sean, that pretty much sums it up, right? You just kind of went, oh crap, close your eyes and bounce down the runway, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's
the
pretty much
15-second version.
Oh my God, Sean, do you race in Reno?
Yeah, I raced in the sport class at Reno. I've been racing there about 4 years, formation instructor, check pilot, and all that kind of fun stuff. I've been typically racing top of the silver, bottom of the gold, so 300 to 350 mile an hour range.
Oh, so cool. I wonder if I saw you. I've been there a couple times to watch Pete race the
Pete Zaccanino.
Pete Zaccanino.
Yeah, I love him. So we're always in his like pit, just like I'm the annoying one that's probably way too loud and excited. But,
I'm sure we've run into each other. You know, we always camp on the grounds there. We're right next to Camp Pete, so.
Oh yay!
We've definitely run into each other.
For next Reno, when it happens again, it's going to happen. We'll have a beer together.
Sounds great. Yeah, come on over to Team Havoc. We'll definitely hook you up with a beer or two.
Oh, awesome! Cool. Well, making it really sound that I love the drinks. Beer.
If anybody ever gets
sponsor this.
If anybody ever gets a chance to come out to Reno, there is the air racing, which I don't know, it's a pretty good part of the day, but it's really all the background. It's the hanging out in the hangars. Reno is probably one of the most intimate aviation experiences you can have, where you can hang out with the fans, the crews, the pilots, and everybody. And then once the gates shut, there are some awesome after parties.
Okay, Armando, you do realize, Armando, you are now hooking us up for that, don't you? You realize that?
Absolutely. Yeah. We will do that. Sean and I will do that for you guys.
Armando's one of our star ramp guys, and you know the whole event wouldn't happen, especially in the sport class, without dedication and volunteers like himself. So yeah, there's somebody that can hook you up. It's him for sure.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and that is honestly the reason that we had to make the decision to cancel Reno this year. Is it is just like Oshkosh, just like Sun and Fun. It is volunteer driven, and you know it was just too much of a risk this year to put a lot of our retiree volunteers in that kind of personal risk. But so Ariel, everybody that listens to this show will have obviously watched the entire season or all seasons of Flying Wild Alaska, probably multiple times, probably have posters up on the wall. Kids still do that. But I actually wanted to talk to you about some of your efforts after the show. So a little bit about Native Shorts, you hosting Native Shorts, and then Into America's Wild, your choice how we want to do this. And something that's really important to us on this show is popping bubbles, right? Because we are just complete advocates of making sure that people get the help that they need, especially, some of our partner podcasts have done some features on mental health and even alcoholism in aviation, and just these things that were normally taboo subjects. But I'd like for you to take a second to talk to us about popping bubbles and your efforts with that. But feel free to, we'll start with Native Shorts, because that was kind of the first thing that you did. So why was that project particularly important to you?
That one, well, my co-host Bird Running Water just is amazing, and he's been a good friend. And so he came up with the idea because he works with Sundance Institute's Native American and Indigenous program. And so I just love the concept because there's so many stories around the world told by Indigenous filmmakers that don't get seen. And so it's just a way to just get some diversity out there and just show that man, there's some amazing storytellers all over the Maori tribes in New Zealand, just all over northern Canada. There's some from Ireland. There's just such great storytellers. But so Native Shorts is just Native short stories. I really was trying to pitch Native Pants for the season 4. And I was like, so we can do feature films and it'll be called Native Pants. But yeah, so that one is just fun. And I think it's just really important for all people to be able to share stories. And they're really cool, though. You could find them, I believe it's on fnxtv.com, or you just Google Native Shorts, and then you should be able to watch the episode. And there's an app to watch every... Yeah. Oh, cool. Awesome. Perfect.
Yeah, we'll put some links in the show notes. So
cool.
And at the same time that Flying Wild Alaska was happening, or at least airing, the whole Alaska thing was so just prevalent. And so we had some other sister shows that we won't mention their shows, but Alaska was featured heavily for a couple years up there. But one of the things that we saw in some of those other shows, I remember Alaska State Troopers was one of the shows, right? I loved that show. But that show particularly highlighted some of the challenges of living in remote areas, which kind of is one of the reasons you started popping bubbles, isn't it?
Yeah. So no, it is. And so one thing really quick. So our show, what was really important for our family and for our producers and our whole team was just to be super authentic and just to show how life is in rural Alaska. And it's not all penguins and polar bears. It's hard. It's a hard lifestyle. I mean, you're isolated, you're in the middle of nowhere. It's just, the weather, the darkness, the lack of good nutritious food, there's so much. And so we wanted to just for it to be real. And I think our team did a really good job on keeping it it wasn't overproduced. There was, I think by season 3, we would have to try to think of we wouldn't think of storylines, but we would be like, hey, I wonder if Ariel and her sister went to the cabin, what would happen? And so they would be like, hey, you should invite your sister to go camping in your cabin this weekend. So it would be stuff like that. And that's as produced as it would get. And so, yeah, I'm really proud of how Flying Wild turned out. But I think there was an episode that talked about suicide. And so for me, I've lost over 30, I think I stopped counting at 37 friends. I lost over half my class to suicide. And so when my best friend did it, I was just so confused because we went to prom together. He was in college, had a girlfriend, so smart, very handsome, charismatic. And then just one day decided to end his life. And so that just pushed me over the edge. And I just was fed up. And I'm like, we need to figure out why this is happening to our people, why this is happening so often, why? And the more I ask that question, the more you realize that no one knows the answer, and we still don't. But for me, in order to prevent suicide, you have to show people that life is worth living. And life is like a roller coaster. You're going to have some amazing high times and it's going to be so fun, but prepare yourself because you're going to be sad. But then in those low times, know that, man, put your hands up because it's going to be so exciting again. And just know that you're going to go up and down. But so for me, in order to prevent suicide, you have to show people that life is worth living. You have to show kids that, hey, like, look at me. I grew up in this little village and now I'm living my dream. I want to be Eskimo Oprah and I'm going to be Eskimo Oprah. Like no one's going to hold you back just because you're like from a small community, just because you look a certain way, just because you talk a certain way. And so the name came, I was talking with a news program in Canada when I was promoting it, but I was talking about how like all of us live in our own little bubble. We're scared to leave our village, to talk to people that look different from us, to talk to people that believe in different religions or politics, to try new things, to like be afraid. And we'd be so much happier if we just popped each other's bubbles. And so that's where the name came up. And yeah, now we do a lot of motivational speaking tours. I'm actually so excited because I'm teaming up with the company that does telehealth. And so now we're working on bringing free like therapy to the villages. So people, all you need is a phone and you could talk to someone, a professional, because we all need help. Like I don't wake up every day with like rainbows and Skittles coming out of like my nostrils. Like some days I'm just like a little bummed. And so I'm like, I want someone to talk to. And so it's that whole thing is like, it's okay to ask for help. We all need it. And yeah, and like for the little kids, it's like, man, have dreams, like set goals for yourself, like dream big and you'll have an awesome life. And then know like coping skills, like you're going to lose loved ones. You're going to break up with your boyfriend or girlfriend. You're going to like wake up on the wrong side of the day. And that shouldn't be the reason you end your life because it's hard. And so, yeah, I could go on and on, but I won't ramble anymore.
Yeah. I mean, know that. So I did a 21-year career in the U.S. Air Force, and we often ask the same questions ourselves. We would try to find patterns. We would try to find indicators. And largely we discovered that it wasn't that easy. Everybody has their own journey and everybody has their own path that leads them to that, that point in their lives. But so you've continued on, and you said like one of the things that you love doing is just highlighting how good it is to be alive. So, and that, I'll let you talk about Into America as well, because we got to tie it to aviation somehow. So I did do a little bit of digging, and I found out that it was partially sponsored by United Airlines. So easy plug for United Airlines.
The people at United were so great too. We promoting the film for that short period that we did. I got to hang out with a lot of like the corporate United people, and they were really fun. But back up really quick. Thank you for all your work that you did to like help people, and in your 21 years. Woo! Just got really excited there.
I'll tell you, while she's just sorting out her video, I'll tell you what we do. We'll play the trailer. So the Into America's Wild, we've got a little bit of a trailer that we can share with you. So let's just run that.
My name is Ariel Tweto, and my passion is just inspiring people about life. Where do I live? I spend most of my time in Alaska. I grew up in this isolated community, and I watched some TV, but I never saw anybody that looked like me. My goal is to inspire girls and boys to be like, she looks like me, she grew up in a place like me, and now she's living her dream. One way I look to inspire kids is by getting them out into nature where they can feel connected to something bigger than themselves. Kayaking or rock climbing or mountain biking. It could also be taking a walk in a local city park. For me, being in nature is where I feel most myself, where I feel creative and energetic and empowered. That's part of the magic of being out in nature. You understand that you are part of this great big universe that is so beautiful and has so much to give us. The important thing is to just get out there and experience it. All we have to do is take advantage of this life that we have. Just make it the best we can.
The scenery looks so stunning, Ariel. Honestly, some of the places that you've been in that film are just amazing.
Oh man, it was such a great experience. It was so much fun. And well, it actually came because of Flying Wild Alaska. Our camera guy on Flying Wild had worked with this IMAX company before, and they were looking for someone to be in the show, and he recommended me. And they called me when I was in Alaska, and they're like, "Hey, are you interested in being a part of this IMAX film?" And I'm like, "Yep." Don't tell me anything more. Like, I'm in. But they flew me down, and I met with the director, and we fell in love. I'm at his house right now, like and so he became a second dad. Like, his wife is like second mom. Their daughter is my sister. The son who runs the company is my brother. Like, we just fell in love. We filmed for like 2 years. And so, and it was so fun and so different than filming our reality show, because for the movie, it's like semi-scripted. You have to, everything's about the sun and the lighting and the clouds. Like, there'd be a cloud in the sky, and our director could like put his fingers up, and he's like, "Okay, everyone has 15 minutes before the cloud passes," to the T. It would be like, "Oh, 15 minutes, it's time." Like, he's amazing, like so good. And just the places we got to go. I got the best day of my life was learning how to kiteboard. We did it in Hood River, Oregon, and I sucked so bad. I sucked as much as I sucked flying for like the first time, but then when you stand up for the first time and when you fly through the air and you like land, it's the best feeling. So I had so much fun, and I'm so lucky. I got to go to some amazing places and see how beautiful our country is and meet amazing people, and I learned so much. And it is like, it's so important to get kids in nature, because I mean, if they're not jumping in the ocean, if they're not climbing trees or smelling flowers, why are they going to care to take care of the planet? And so I think it's so important to get kids dirty and to get them just like scraped up and just like go and play outside. It's so good for your mental health, and it's so inspiring. Like, whenever I need to like get uplifted, I'll just go for a walk or a run, and that's where my ideas come from, and that's where creativity and curiosity comes from. And so I loved making it.
Yeah, and you did this project with John Harrington and Jennifer Davis. John is an astronaut who you're like out to prove that astronauts aren't these stuffy engineers, right?
Oh my God, John is the goofiest person. So I went in thinking like, oh gosh, this guy's gonna be all buttoned up and really like straight and narrow. He's dancing in the parking lot. He's like we had so much fun. And I love John. And then Jennifer Farr Davis is this just amazing lady. She has the record, male or female, for the quickest through hike through the Appalachian Trail. It just is, man, her legs go up to like my eyeballs. I'm like, there's no way I'm going to be able to to keep up with her. She's so fast, but she's so powerful, and just like, she's so inspirational. So the people I got to meet on that movie is awesome. And hopefully theaters will open soon so people could watch it, because like with the IMAX, with like the 3D cameras and everything, like the landscape, the shots are just so pretty.
So, Ariel, Matt's got some questions that have come from our live chat room viewers.
Indeed, yeah. So, ironically, we'll start with another namesake. So, this guy's also called Matt Smith, so that's slightly odd. But there we are. This could get very confusing. So, his question actually is, when did you feel most in danger, and why? I presume you're sort of talking about like flying and things like that.
Flying? Yeah, I was like, flying or life? Very different.
I mean, we'll take answers for both. That's fine as well.
So flying, my solo flight, that was actually pretty terrifying. My cross country flight, that one was, I got just way off course, and then again, like, I don't know, my plane had horrible radio comms, and so that one I lost course, and then my radios went bad again. So that was a little scary, but I just knew to go and find the ocean. And then, because villages are all along the ocean, and so I figured that one out. But that was pretty terrifying. Other than that, I've been pretty fortunate to be pretty safe up in the air. And I make it seem like I'm pretty dingy and like a doofus, but when I'm in the plane, I put my big lady pants on and try to be professional. So I mean, I need to at some point, and so and I want to live, and so I know how dangerous flying could be, especially in Alaska.
Oh,
and so I definitely take it seriously.
I bet. Graham is asking in the chat room, saying, what's the most interesting place that you've ever landed, both as a passenger and a pilot?
Well, I mean, I'm still a private pilot, so I haven't landed in anything like just at our cabin. Like we have a little cabin out in the boonies in Alaska near our village. It's like a 25-minute plane ride from our village. So landing there was pretty cool. It's just a little dirt landing strip. Landing with my dad in the mountains is the best thing ever. You're just like, there's no way you could land on that. And you're like, oh my God, we just landed. How'd that happen? But so landing with my dad is pretty phenomenal, though. He's such a good pilot, and and he's always like just constantly looking for landing strips, sandbars, and little like mountain ridge lines. And I just love flying with my dad. Oh, wait, time out. There was another fun one too. The North Captiva outside of Florida. That was cool because I shot a little thing with M0A. Plug for M0A. It's just like, the water is so blue and it's so pretty and it's warm. So, you're landing on this tiny little island, which was really fun. So that was pretty neat.
Wow. Richard King is asking, Ariel, is Jim still flying his Cessna 180?
Oh yeah, that's his baby every day. I was just with him like a week ago, and he had to fly his 207 into Anchorage, and he swapped it out for his 180, and now he has awesome like bush tires on it. But yeah, he won't let me go near that thing without him. I know. I think he thinks if I just stare at it, I'm going to ruin it. So I'm not allowed near that plane without him.
Oh, no.
To be fair, I think a lot of pilots that own an airplane, that's how the case is. Be like, nobody's actually allowed to touch this airplane but me.
It was actually funny though. So I'm doing another show, or it's just an episode on a show called Know Her Name, and we're doing an episode on Amelia Earhart.
Oh, wow.
And so we needed some footage like quickly with me and my dad. So we're in there. He only has one yoke. Like the other one fell off. And so I'm like, Dad, I need it to like sort of look like I'm flying. And he's like, well, just jump over on my side. We're in the air. And I'm like, Dad, and there's duct tape all over because there's holes everywhere in his plane. So yeah, my dad's flying around with like one yoke, holes in his plane. And I'm like, I think you could probably afford to maybe like get a new yoke and like some like better tape or something.
Gaffer tape, that'll mend anything. If you they say if you can't mend it with gaffer tape, you can't mend it at all. That's the end of it.
I grew up like sorry.
I was going to say the alternative is lease it back to a flight school, and then it fit right in with the rest of the training fleet.
The planes. Yeah, he's so funny. I just grew up. I mean, he grew like just duct tape everywhere. Like I was saying when I was younger, like it's so cold where we're at, but he didn't get a heater for his plane. Me and my sisters would have to get our hair dryers and go and sit and like heat up his engine with a hair dryer before he went to work. And that was like part of our job before going to school, was to go and like thaw out his engine.
Wow. I mean, just crazy. We've got one more question, a couple more questions, from the chat room. So this is from Tony saying, question for Ariel, what's the formula for making entertaining TV whilst keeping it realistic? There's a challenge for you.
Yeah. Well, just being authentic. Like, I think everyone has a story to tell. And if you're curious enough about, I think, people in the world, you could pull out the stories and learn from other people. But like for me, it's just like, I know, like, one, our family was in a unique situation because my dad and mom's airline is so essential. And so like you need good characters, you need a like unique situation, and and then you need a good format for the story to be told. And so Discovery Channel was the right timing. It was and this like like I said, our show wasn't overproduced. We were honest and we just had fun. Like, I love my parents. It sounds so corny and cheesy, but they are like my best friends. My sisters are my best friends. Our pilots, I mean, I'm so lucky I have like over 70 brothers and sisters. Like most of our pilots ended up living with us while they're doing their training. So I'm just lucky to have such a great family and amazing friends and people that challenge me and people that would tell me to like tone it down if I get too like excited about things. And my dad definitely brings me back down to earth because he says I'm overconfident in everything that I do. And so he's like, man, you're an addict to adrenaline, which I am. And so it's just like I constantly have to just like, okay, am I chasing this feeling or what's going on with me? But yeah, I think that's to go back to your question. You need good characters, you need good stories, you need a unique situation for people, and then you need the right timing is everything too.
And I couldn't agree more. It's a difficult one, isn't it, really? Because you want it to be entertaining, but of course, you know, it's very common, isn't it, for things to be over-dramatized or, you know, careful editing, if you like, to make things perhaps appear differently to how it actually happened, things like that.
Yeah, and also my dad got the final say in the footage because, I mean, he's the president of this big company. He cares so much about his employees. So he needed to make sure, like, is everything legal? Are the producers pushing you guys too hard to get a good story? Like, number one thing is safety in our flying, like in the airline business. And so, like, he was really good at being like, nope, they're not doing that. Nope, not doing that. Sure, we could do that, but let's do it this way. Okay, that's a really good idea, but it's not legal. Let's figure out a different way to tell this story. So he was great at like doing like just managing like stories versus safety versus like all of that. And also like my parents, like no one in our family wanted, like we weren't like chasing to be a movie star, or like none of us fight or are dramatic, and like we're not, we like each other, and like we don't argue. Like if we disagree with things, we figure out a civil way to like overcome like different obstacles. And so I mean, in some ways, like we're the worst family to be on TV because we're not gonna like backstab each other, or like me and my mom, like, geez, number one, you would never want to fight with my mom. So we knew that very early on, not to make her mad. And then my dad is the most calm human being on the planet. Like you're never going to get him to like get riled up. And so, it was weird that like that people liked watching us, because like in our eyes, we are sort of just like this or normal. But I think the storylines like were all really interesting because it is a unique place that we live in, and I'm like really happy that I grew up where I grew up.
Well, honestly, Ariel, the story. I mean, we could we needed to extend the show by at least 3 hours, I think, and just have you
invite me back. Invite me back.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'll definitely
done.
have you back.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely have you back. But no, it's been so nice to talk to you, and I really, on behalf of all the team, you know, thanks for coming on and joining us and taking time out of your beautiful day there.
No, thank you guys so much. And I'll plug one more thing. There's a new cartoon coming out on Fox, and I'm a little voice. It's called The Great North. And so that one, we just got picked up for our second season, but the first season should start airing in the next like couple weeks, I believe. But that's my one plug for right now. And then we have another animated series coming out as well. I guess people think I have a weird voice, and so I've been doing a lot with
not weird, interesting voice, not weird, interesting.
Interesting voice. So now, I'm getting into animation, and I'm just I love like getting kids just excited, and I like making people laugh, and so so that's where that's going. And I'm gonna keep flying. I still have my private license. I still go flying when I go home, and all my buddies have Super Cubs, and we'll go flying, and I'll start posting more pictures of those adventures.
So before we go and let you go, get back to your busy day on the beach, Ariel. One last question.
I'm working right now.
One last question, and we'll let Armando ask. It's the all-important last question that we ask all our guest pilots and guests that we have on the show.
We do very rarely have two guests on the same show. So Sean, earmuffs.
Earmuff Sean.
Okay.
Ariel, if money was no object, and you could fly any aircraft in the world, past, present, or future, what aircraft would that be?
Yeah, man, I'm in love. I like the Beaver. Like those are so fun. My dad used to have this Beech 18. That he said to that one. That I would love to fly that plane, or an Albatross. Just to be able to take all your buddies and load up the Albatross with all your friends, coolers of beer, and then go land on like the lake and just hang out and jump off the wings and have a party, and then have your friend fly back. That'd be so fun. But yeah, I love all those three planes. I think would be my my top 3. I don't need to go super fast. I like to be able to land in fun places and be able to carry some friends with me.
I like your style. All 3 of those are radial engine twins, except for the
Happy days.
Oh my gosh, that's great. What a wonderful answer.
Yeah.
So Ariel, on behalf of all the team here at PTUK, a big thanks for coming on the show.
Quick, how can they follow you on social media and all that kind of thing?
I was getting to that bit. Don't panic. Yeah. So where can?
I thought you weren't going to ask this question.
No. Where can if anyone doesn't know where you are at the minute on social media, where can people follow you on social media?
It's all pretty simple. It's just at Ariel Tweto, and Tweto is with 1 E, Tweto. It's Norwegian. It's supposed to be Tweto.
There we go.
Yep. My dad's a big old Viking. I got nothing from him.
Well, we wish you all the best and safe travels, Ariel, because we know you love a good accent and the cut every now and then.
Let's definitely all keep in touch, and let's meet at Oshkosh or Reno, and then let's all meet together to do your podcast in the UK sometime.
And if you come to the UK, just
let us know. We'll be there. Absolutely. Yeah. Interesting fact, by the way. It is exactly 8 years to the day that the last episode was aired. By the way.
Oh no way!
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. 8 years to the day, literally.
Oh, crazy!
Yeah. Anyway, we need to let you. We need to let you go. Thank you so very much.
Thanks, Ariel.
Thank you guys
much
so
appreciated. And guys,
have fun.
We're going to move on to the plane truths this week. Matt and Al, that would be me, Matt, are talking about window blinds. Hi there again, and welcome to another part of The Plain Truth. Joining me again is the awesome Captain Al. Hi, Captain Al.
Hello.
Now, listen, for this week's little chat, one thing that's always bugged me is... I don't do a great deal of flying, as everybody knows, but one of the things that's always intrigued me is we're always told that we have to have the blinds up during takeoff and landing. It doesn't matter whether it's daytime or nighttime. We always have to make sure that they're up. Now, I wondered is there an actual reason why, or is it just the cabin crew being mean?
Oh, it's the cabin crew being mean, of
excellent.
course.
I did wonder.
No. Yeah. So, what's behind those blinds?
Well, the windows.
Absolutely. So the windows allow us to see outside. So the whole purpose of having the blinds up for takeoff and landing is that it enhances our situational awareness as to what is going on outside of the aeroplane. If we pull the blinds down, we have no idea. So why do we need to know what's going on outside of the aeroplane? Well, that's going to be incredibly useful to you if for any reason you have to get out of that aeroplane in a hurry. An emergency evacuation might be an example of that. So it allows you the opportunity to assess outside, and also it allows the cabin crew to assess outside. So for example, if there were lots of flames on the right-hand side of the aircraft, the cabin crew and the passengers at emergency exits are forewarned of that fire, those flames, and may choose to use an alternative route that doesn't take you to a fiery death.
Okay, and presumably, that works the other way as well. I mean, presumably it means that, again, I hadn't really thought of this, to be honest. I assume it means that emergency services can see in.
Absolutely. Yeah, those windows are two-way, so absolutely. It's less so for that reason because, it's obviously advantageous to be able to see through a window. If there's a window and a blind, nobody can see anything. But primarily, it's for the passengers and crew to be aware of what's happening outside.
Captain Al, thank you.
No problem.
If you want to take your knowledge to the next level, sign up for a subscription at the A320 Lounge. Our online video courses combine whiteboard-style lessons with full failure demonstrations shot in 4K in state-of-the-art simulators using a professional production team. Go into your next simulator session with confidence, having seen failures run in real time and with the background knowledge to answer any questions from your instructor. To get more information and to sign up, visit a320lounge.com.
Wow. Oh, wow. There we are. Okay. Thanks, Captain Al, as always. Great segment. Really enjoyed that. It's one of those questions I've always wanted to know the answer to is why are we made to put the blinds down and put them up? It's one of the things that have always bugged me. And now I know. Armando, over to you.
Yeah.
Over to you.
I wanted to move on to Sean. So in a moment of transparency, so Sean and I work together, as he said, out at Reno. He does all the cool stuff. He gets to wear the pop collar and sign all the autographs and shake hands and kiss babies. While
I thought it was shake babies and kiss hands.
Yeah. So you can only do that once before the cops show up.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But so Sean is just an amazing individual. We talked about it last week when we were promoting today's show. But just what an amazing person, and he's just. I've always been impressed by Sean's not just ability to fly and be competitive, but just his approachability, and he's incredibly well respected in the Reno air racing in the sport class that we work in. But Sean, so you soloed at 17 in a Citabria. You went to Central Oregon Community College. You had a degree in aviation. You went on to become an aerobatic competitor, a flight instructor. Somehow in there you started flying at Reno. Somewhere in there you started test flying airplanes. So, oh my gosh. So first of all, thank you for hanging in there and welcome to the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate being here.
Yeah, this is great. And we're going to talk about some things that are just absolutely captivating to our audience. But so how did you get into aviation? Was it a family thing? How'd you get into this?
So I don't have any family that flies. And we had a family friend. I was about 9 years old at the time. We had a family friend that was part of the Experimental Aircraft Association, and he was giving Young Eagle rides. So he offered to me, my family, to take me up on a Young Eagle ride. He had this Cherokee 140. So, at 9 years old, they sit you in the right seat and you're out flying around and they take off. And then he's like, oh, hey, you want to fly it? It's like, of course, 9-year-old kid. What 9-year-old kid doesn't want to fly an airplane? So take the yoke and like trying to peer up above the instrument panel, flying the thing around. And just like at that moment, you're like, this is so cool. I have to do this all the time. So I had a little, like a lawnmower powered mini bike at the time. So I sold that and I bought my first remote control airplane. And over the next year, my dad and I flew every single weekend at the remote control flying field, learning how to fly RC airplanes. And then after that, we got a little bit smarter and we put a temperature limit on it to say if it's anything less than about 10 degrees Celsius, 40 degrees Fahrenheit for us Americans, we're going to stay at home. But if it's above 40, we're going flying. And almost every single weekend, that kind of morphed into, building and modifying remote control airplanes, testing remote control airplanes, and eventually doing competition scale RC aerobatics. So the same kind of aerobatic competitions that we have with full-scale aircraft, we do with about third scale, 40% scale extras and edges and whatnot, flying the same arresty sort of patterns and also freestyle competition.
Yeah, and there's some great YouTube videos on that too. If you look up RC aerobatic competitions, it's amazing, and it's actually hard to tell whether it's a real aircraft. And I know over in the UK there was a show, an air show performer that was in an extra that would do a show with I think it was a half scale model of an extra. Really popular show, really great, and that was the only place that I had ever seen it was over in the UK.
We actually have a guy here in Oregon that did the same thing. He was based in Salem. He had a 2-seat mid-wing extra, and he had I think it was a 40% scale mid-wing extra RC airplane that they would fly. Obviously they're not in formation, but because of the parallax area, you can have one aircraft. The full-scale airplane is higher and farther out. The RC airplane is closer, but it's a much smaller airplane, so they look like they're in formation if you're standing in the right place in the crowd. It was really cool.
Yeah, I thought that was really, really cool when I saw it for the first time over there too. But so I want to move like right into the meat and potatoes. So how did you get involved with Reno Air Racing, which is where you and I met? Yeah,
that's a long story. And I'll try to keep it as short as I can. I started flying So like I said, we started flying remote control airplanes, and then at that point I became aware of the Reno air races and started following it religiously. It's just the people at Reno, both in all the classes, unlimited, specifically unlimiteds because everybody loves that, but also jet class and sport class, just because sport class was a little bit more accessible, and jets are cool too. All those pilots and a lot of the pilots that we get to interact with every day now, that kind of became heroes of mine. And just following the races every year, who's the big name, who's blowing up, who's not, and that was all really cool. RC airplanes started getting really big for me. I started competing a lot, as I said, and I got to the point where I was kind of at a turning point. I could either decide to invest a little bit more in remote control flying and try to garner some sponsorship and continue down that path, or I remember I was sitting in my room one day looking at all these RC airplanes. I was about 16 years old, something like that. I was like, wait, the whole reason I got started in this was to fly full-scale aircraft. It was a stepping stone because it didn't make any sense for me to do that at 9. But now I've proven that I'm committed to aviation. So let's start taking lessons. So I didn't give up RC, but I severely scaled back on it. Started flying the Citabria, like you talked about, soloed in that, then finished my private in a 172 the Friday the 13th after I graduated high school. And then from there, I got a high-performance endorsement in a Cessna 182, and I went over and I flew with, who's now a friend of mine, mentor of mine for sure, Steve Wolf in the Pitts S2B. So instead of, I actually got a sponsorship, or not a sponsorship, but a scholarship to get my multi-engine rating, private pilot multi-engine rating. And instead of doing that, I took the money and I went and I did a full Pitts checkout with Steve Wolf, and I had about 80 hours, 85 hours total time, something like that. And that was the best thing I ever could have done. It taught me so much about how to actually fly an airplane, and also to take the skills that I had flying remote control aerobatics and transfer those directly into a full-scale airplane was incredible. And you learn so much more about aerodynamics when you're truly operating in three-dimensional space. A lot of times when we fly airplanes, we take off, we go to a cruise altitude, we fly around at that altitude, and then we come back down. It's very two-dimensional flying. Aerobatics is not. You're maneuvering, you're fully using that third dimension. You have to think, your situational awareness involves much more energy management than traditional flying does. Just really, really great experience. Fast forward a few years, went to college, got an associate's degree, got a bachelor's degree in physics, minor in music, was towing banners for a couple of years. Tons of stories with that, but that's for another time for sure. And then went off and I came back. I graduated college, graduated Oregon State University, and was looking for a job. A friend of mine, Tony Horvath, who works at Specialty Aero, he cut his teeth working for Steve Wolf back in the day. And he was looking for, I'd always check in with him because he always had cool projects. Most notably to his name, Steve Wolf designed Sean Tucker's airplane and Tony Horvath built it. So that airplane comes from this small little town outside of Eugene, Oregon, which is just insanely cool. So Tony kind of took me under his wing. I worked 2 years for him doing experimental aircraft fabrication and building, a little bit of testing here and there. We worked on a roadable airplane project and a bunch of Pittses and stuff like that. A really exceptional experience to get that hands-on fabrication experience and engineering and stuff like that. And when I was working there, I started flying competition aerobatics again. And was competing in intermediate, sportsman and intermediate at the national level, and ended up getting a call from a friend of mine who actually hooked me up with I met working line service back in high school, and who hooked me up with my first flying job. And he called me up and he says, "Hey, we just bought an extreme decathlon, and we need some training in it. None of our pilots are tailwheel rated. We want to start this upset company." I'm like, as it turns out, I just placed third at nationals in an extreme decathlon. So I feel like I could probably teach you how to fly that airplane. It's like, I knew you'd be the right guy to call. So I came over and they were in Central Oregon, came over, walked in the hangar. I see the extreme decathlon sitting in the back of the hangar, but between the extreme decathlon and me are two Fuga Magisters, which for those of you who don't know what they are, it's a really weird looking V-tail French trainer jet from the 60s. And so we start talking and he's like, I promise this will get there somehow. So we start talking. He's like, "Hey, if you want, come on over and just pay for gas. You don't have to pay for the airplane. and you can get checked out in a Fuga. So I was thinking about it. I'm just graduated college. I'm broke, living month to month. I was like, how can I make this work? Because they were doing all of the flight testing for the Lancer Evolution at the time, and the rest of the Lancer products at the same time. So it's like, how can I make this work? No, I just can't afford it, blah, blah, blah. And I went back home. I thought about it for a night. I'm like, I need to figure out a way to do this. So I took out an unsecured loan for the gas, because it's like $6,000 in fuel, and I came back over and said, hey, does that offer still stand? And thinking, if I come back, I kick butt, in training, even though I'm a low-time pilot, I don't have any jet experience. If I kick butt doing this, maybe they'll take me on and teach me some of the stuff they do with flight testing and Lancers and turbine equipment and whatnot. And that's exactly what happened. If you fly a Lancers, yep, there's a Fuga right there. So if you fly a Lancer, there's a bunch of Lancers that race at Reno. And if you're an instructor and a test pilot in those aircraft, it's definitely a pretty good feather to have in your cap to say, yep, I've raced at Reno in a Lancer. So we ended up finding a way, ended up borrowing a friend's airplane that had a Lancer Legacy to race my first year in 2016. That's this batch right here. And my rookie year came out, we kicked butt. We qualified at like 295 miles an hour and ended up placing, I think it was 4th in Sport Silver. And that's kind of how I got wrapped into the Reno world. And then it's just accelerated from there for sure.
And then Reno in itself is exhilarating flying. So we've had George Catalano, we've had James Stringer on, and most recently we had Bob Mills on, all talking about their experience and how they ended up at Reno and kind of what it's like to fly a lap around the course, at least in the sport class. But last year, this was the moment where I knew Sean was an absolute rock star. So last year you had
He uses that term very liberally.
And I've said it before. Reno I've been flying for 21 years. I've flown 26 different airplanes. And when I go to Reno, I don't say anything. And pilots like to talk. Right. And I don't say anything because the stories are captivating. The caliber of people, not just pilots, but the crews and the instructors is just unimaginable. And this was one of those moments. This was one of those moments where when I was watching you debrief, I just said, man, this guy's got it, right? So you had this Mayday experience that, and let me clarify that. So Maydays, so in aviation, Maydays are usually a thing, right? It's an emotional event and it usually involves the FAA. There's all kinds of psychological studies about, when people do and don't call a Mayday because they're afraid of talking to the FAA and the NTSB. But the FAA openly says at Reno, Maydays are free. So don't be afraid to call a Mayday. So you had your own Mayday experience last year.
Yes, I did. I don't know if you want to set the stage for that or if you just want me to start running.
Go for it. I can't tell it better than you, so.
So like I said, the previous 3 years we had raced. So last year was our 4th year campaigning at Reno. The previous 3 years we had raced in the sport class, borrowing Lancer Legacies, just kind of bombing around at around the 280, 290 mile an hour mark. And we decided that we wanted to actually go racing as opposed to just participate and, try and go actually get some trophies. So we came up with a team, maintenance personnel, team owner, pilot, test pilot, and all this stuff, media personnel, putting everything together. Went out and bought a twin turbocharged Glasair 3. It was actually from a previous owner, had an engine failure with it, had to put it down on the road. It had some damage. And we worked tirelessly for a year and a half rebuilding this airplane from the ground up, completely changed the fuel system, ignition system, avionics package, data acquisition system in the airplane. And just working, long hours to try to get this thing ready. April before PRS, we flew the airplane for the first time, did, all the phase 1 through April and May, went to PRS, which for those of you who don't know, PRS is Pylon Racing Seminar. For those of us in Reno, we have to go there either to stay current or to qualify the new pilots. And that's 3 months prior. That's in June. We get to go out and just have a ton of fun flying around the course and learning new things from, like Armando was saying, the exceptional pilots that come out to Reno that, just truly incredible people to fly with. And had a great experience there, came back home, tore the whole airplane apart again, ended up, Macaulay Propellers, they built us up this really cool race prop, installed a water and ADI system, fuel, fire suppression, all the safety items that you need as well. And then the goal was to started doing testing at higher and higher power settings. So in June, we'd only taken the airplane up to about 40 inches of manifold pressure. Our goal was to race at 65 to 70 inches in September. We only made it up to about 60 in testing, so that's what we did in September. Come September, did our practice, came in, in brief, all that fun stuff, tech inspection, came in. And again, after a year and a half of just tirelessly working on this airplane, came in, did our practice flight, everything went well. We did another test flight on the airplane. Everything was working really well, getting the water and ADI system kind of fine-tuned, and everything was working great at about 58 to 60 inches. And it's like, okay, this is going to be really cool. We're going to qualify first thing Monday morning. The first slot we can possibly get. We'll take the airplane down, wrench on it for 3 days, and then do a test flight Wednesday. If everything goes well, then we should be able to run in like 70 inch mark, which was our goal anyways, and then race the rest of the week. So take off to qualify. I forget who the other two pilots were in that, but it was myself and then Conrad Huffsteller, Sport 90 was in the flight with me. And we take off, we come down the chute, using the good old John Parker method, Blue Thunder, which Armando's wearing the shirt today. He taught me him and Vicky Benzing, I remember just sitting in the background and listening to them talk about their qualifying technique, because you need to have a level lap before you call for the clock. Well, the definition of level is within the course boundaries, and the course boundaries are there's 200 feet to work with there. So you definitely have some energy management that you can work with if you play your cards right. So listen to them, trying to tease out exactly what they do to really get those good qualifying times. Came down, I hit the guide pylon at 391 miles an hour and 60 inches of manifold pressure. Airplane was just singing. It was just working great. And I'm just sitting there hanging on for dear life, trying to keep this thing inside the course boundaries because it's going crazy fast. Get settled in, just about to call for the clock. And then they call, all racers off the course. We've got firebombers that are coming in. It's like, crap.
That's right. I forgot that year they were fighting fires. Yeah.
Yep. Just got this thing set up, and it takes about a half a lap to get, the prop and the mixture and everything just right where you want it, right tuned in and fiddled. We call it twizzling, get everything twizzled right where you want it. Crap. And I had this big head of steam coming into the guide pylon that now I don't have that energy to play with anymore. So I have to pull back off. I tried to keep spun up as good as I could, got called back on, came down on as much of a head of steam as I could. But at this point, it was only 375 or something like that. Lost a good 20 miles an hour advantage. And came in, called for the clock, really good qualifying run. Airplane ran great, pulled off, got it cooled down, come in, downwind to beam, select gear down, and I get 2 green and 1 red. These things happen, So
in itself a pretty simple emergency, something manageable, right?
Yeah, emergency. So there's one of 2 things that could be going on. It's either the gear isn't coming down for some reason, there's some sort of hydraulic or mechanical failure that's going on, or 2, and more than likely, it's some sort of indication failure because you're relying on micro switches that are out there and the elements, and they just fail. So I bring the gear back up. I call the tower and say, hey, I'm going to go up to cool down, and I have a landing gear indication error showing only 2 green. I'm going to go up to cool down, diagnose the problem. And they said, okay, it sounds great. So I climb up a couple thousand feet over where I was. So I'm 3,000 to 4,000 feet over the top of the airport, and try to get the gear down. Normal extension doesn't work. Emergency extension doesn't work. Still same result. So left main landing gear is green, nose gear is green, right main landing gear is red. So red is unsafe, right? Neither up nor down. It's somewhere we don't know where it is. So after trying that 2 or 3 times, it's okay, I need help now. It's I don't have enough eyes. I can't look underneath the airplane and see what's going on. So I look down and I see Sport 90, Conrad, in the flare, and I call him up and I say, hey, both him and race control, I say, hey, would you guys mind sending Sport 90 up? I need a chase to help diagnose this issue. And okay, great. So he launches, comes up, forms up on me. It's yeah, sure enough, your right main is stuck about 1 inch out of the gear well. And it's not moving at all. So we go through a variety of different ways that, I had probably 35 or 45 minutes worth of fuel at this point. So at this point, I'm thinking in my head, all right, what are the options? So one option is land, gear up, in control, gear up on the runway. If we do that, we're done for the week, and we're not going to race again until next year. Airplane may be lost to a post-crash fire or skidding fire. May or may not be. We'll see. But I've got 40 minutes of fuel on board. If I'm going to go skidding the airplane down the runway, I don't really want all that gas on board because that can catch fire. So let's try to burn some of it off, diagnosing the gear issue that we have. And so start diagnosing the gear issue. We go through a variety of different things trying to get the gear down. While doing that, we're putting so much electrical load on the airplane. We have 2 independent electrical buses, and the bus with the hydraulic pump on it failed, or it stopped charging rather. So the either the alternator or the voltage regulator on that side of the system failed and stopped charging. So now I'm just relying on the battery to run the electric hydraulic pump to get the gear up and down. So I know eventually by doing that electrical bus will fail. It will go to 0, and then I don't have a choice because pumping it down manually wasn't working either. So at that point, it's like, okay, and remember before I talked about we had a dual, fully redundant electrical fuel injection and ignition system. So they run off of each of the 2 buses, and they share the bus load to keep the engine running. So what I did at that point is I said, okay, I know that this bus is compromised. I'm going to take all of my engine critical items and shift them over to this bus. So this bus, which is still charging, which is still good, is going to keep running the engine. And this bus, I'm just going to rely, which is compromised, I'm just going to rely on to get swing gear as much as I can. So we finally got to the point where it's like, oh, we saw the gears started to move, right? It's like, oh, okay, cool, something changed. So since something changed, there's hope now. I was just about ready to say, all right, we're done. We're just going to come in and land, gear up, and that's what it is. But then we got this moving. I'm like, let's try 2 more things, right? And just basically more speed, basically just trying to rip the landing gear out of the wings. So you get going really fast, and you pull as much G as you can while you select gear down. Trying to use the excess, the load, the load factor is going to make that wheel weigh a whole bunch more. And hopefully that extra weight, that extra force is going to rip the landing gear out of the wing and get it down. So I tried one at like 140 knots, didn't work. I tried one at like 170, 180 knots, didn't work. So I was like, okay, we're going to do this one more time. Going to select gear up, and then we're going to come in at about 250 knots, pull 6.5 Gs, 7 Gs, or whatever it takes. If that doesn't work, the gear's never going to come down. So then we'll just come back in and land. And when I selected gear up, the engine failed, and all of the avionics went blank. And what ended up happening was one of the circuit breakers that controlled the good bus broke, actually physically broke, which is very, very strange failure mode. And it fell down onto the bus that was compromised. And when that bus went to 0 volts, it drug the good bus down to 0 with it. And then since the engine is relying on electrical power, then that killed the engine. And it also took all of the avionics and everything else with it. So at this point, about 3,500 feet, 3,000 feet above the airport, a mile and a half north of the airport, pointed at the airport. And I knew I was going to land at this point. It's like I was looking at the windsocks, like I know I'm going to land runway 14. If I have any sort of failure, or if I'm going to come in and land gear up, I had already planned I'm going to land on runway 14, and I'm just going to go straight for a high key, do my simulated flame out pattern, which I practice all the time, to come in and land on that runway. So when the engine quit, it was actually almost kind of a calming moment, because at that point, instead of this question of what are we doing, where are we going, can I get the gear down? You're having to make all these decisions. And when the engine quit, all of a sudden, all of those decisions are made for you. It doesn't matter where the landing gear is, because it is where it is. You can't change that. It doesn't matter, you don't have the choice anymore to go anywhere else. You are landing on runway 14 because the engine quit, and you're a really bad glider right now. So, and then I have this procedure that I use, which comes from military procedures, to get down from a certain altitude and a certain airspeed down to the runway and land if the engine quits, which I practice on a regular basis. So at that point, it's like, okay, great, that's what we're doing. The biggest problem was, since I lost all of my instrumentation, I I had no airspeed, I had no altitude, and I had no radios. So when I keyed the mic to call the Mayday to race control, it didn't go through. And at the same time, Conrad's on my wing. He can't talk to me either because my radio's dead. He's trying to raise me. And when he realizes that I can't, and then he saw the prop feather, when he's like, oh, we're doing this now. Like, you actually have an engine failure. So in that point, he tried to call back to race control and say, hey, Sport 3 is a Mayday. But at that point, there was a flight that was coming on the course. There was a flight that was coming off the course, another flight that was departing the runway, another flight that was landing. There was all this radio chatter, and he couldn't get a word in edgewise. All the while, I'm just, happily gliding down to the runway. The big issue for me... I
like how you casually say, oh, I'm just casually crashing, essentially.
Yeah. Well, at this point, I'm planning on more or less landing, right? The biggest issue that I had was we had an electronic flight instrument system, a glass panel, and we had a backup, another electric instrument that was glass as well, but a backup instrument that was battery powered. So when both buses failed, the main EFIS went away. So there's no airspeed, no altitude there. I don't have any information on the airplane. I'm busy trying to get the engine relit. And then once I realized that I can't relight the engine, I was like, okay, we're landing runway 14. I'm at high key. Everything looks good. I look over at my backup instrument, and it's dead too. So at this point, I'm going, well, of course that failed because everything else did, so why not? So at this point, I don't, altitude you can judge fairly well especially within like 3,000 or 4,000 feet, how high you are off the ground. But airspeed, you can't. It's all based on feel. And feel in an airplane is bad. It's based on where you put the trim and what aerodynamic consideration, how heavy you are. There's all this stuff that plays into that. And the trim in a glass air is spring-based, so they don't actually have a trim tab that aerodynamically drives the elevator to where you want it to be. They actually have a spring that provides force one way or the other to kind of force the elevator to be somewhere. And it just has a weird feel to it. But I knew I had it trimmed for about 140, 150 knots. So I just put a couple pounds of back pressure. I said, I know that's going to be safe. Because I want to be on the high side, not the slow side. If I'm fast, I know I can fly the airplane. It's a controllable, everything's fine. If I'm slow, potential is slow speed. You lose efficiency. Worst case scenario, you end up stalling, or it could lead to a stall spin at low altitude. It takes about 3,000 feet to recover from a spin in the glass air, and if that happens, you're dead. There's nothing, no two ways about it. So being a little bit faster is better than being a little bit slower. So I get it low key, I'm downwind of beam, looking at the runways, like altitude, okay. Airspeed, unknown. Start my turn to base, and when I turned to base, I realized altitude, still okay. Airspeed, way too fast. So at this point, full rudder slip, just trying to put as much drag on the airplane as I can. I came over the threshold at about 30 feet off the ground, which is right where I wanted to be altitude-wise. But Conrad said, he was watching the airspeed, and he was on and Conrad, amazing formation skills, amazing chase pilot. He was exactly what I needed the entire time to just be feeding me information when we had radio comms. But then also when my failure happened, he was able to tell other people what was going on and be able to make sure that we were kind of going in a place that, going in a direction that was going to keep both of us safe and at least get me back to a runway or the airport environment. It's just absolutely incredible having somebody of that caliber on my wing to help me out. Something that you don't get at a normal place. In Reno, we have all these amazing pilots. You can say, hey, I need help. You get in an air or get on the radio and help me through this. Most of the time, as a pilot, you're just on your own out flying around.
Mm-hmm. At this point, I'll interject because if you're on the ground and you're on the support staff or you're in the grandstands at Reno, you can see all of this happening until about this point that Sean's talking about, which is 30 feet over the threshold. At that point, there's a little hill between where everybody is and that arrival end of runway 14. So at this point, where you go on from here in the story, we couldn't see anything.
Right. So I come over the fence, come over the threshold of the runway. It's like I said, airspeed's about right, or altitude is about right. Airspeed is way too fast. I can just tell it's way too fast. Conrad said that we were doing, when he looked at the airspeed indicator, we were doing about 155 knots. And if I had an engine failure, I would aim to cross the threshold at 110 knots, 100 knots to 110 knots. So we're a good 40 to 50 knots above the speed that we should be. And remember that kinetic energy is proportional to velocity squared. So that much extra energy is exponentially more, or that much extra airspeed is exponentially more energy that you have to figure out how to dissipate somehow. And also, as I'm coming into the flare and disappearing behind the hill that Armando was talking about, I don't know where the landing gear is because the landing gear indicator isn't working. So it could be down, it could be up, it could be like 1 down and 2 up, or some unknown configuration that would be really bad. So I'm coming into the flare. My first consideration is, where is the landing gear, right? What do I have to deal with? Is this airplane going to try to dart real hard one way? Do I have no gear, which is the ideal scenario? I can just set it down on the belly. What's going to happen? And I knew I didn't have all three down locked. So as I'm coming in, I was just feeling in the flare, all right, this is about where the landing gear should have touched. Nothing left or right. Okay, good. Gears up, or at least mostly up. That's a good sign. So from here, you keep on coming down, and I can't say there's this thing called ground effect, for those of you who don't know, called ground effect in aviation. It's basically, you've got a wing that has high pressure air on the bottom of the wing, low pressure air on the top of the wing. So, and at the wing tip, because we can't have an infinitely long wing, the high pressure air spills over to the low pressure air and creates a vortice. And this vortice creates actually a sizable amount of drag on the airplane. So if you can get really low to the ground, it kills a lot of that vortice. And because it kills a bunch of that vortice, it's effectively the same as increasing the efficiency of your wing because you have less drag. On the glass air with the gear down, I can't say that I ever felt anything I would classify as ground effect. The glass air at 6 inches off the ground has a huge amount of ground effect. So all of a sudden, I have way too much speed. I come down, I get to about 6 inches, and it feels like the airplane accelerated. Like, now this 11,000 foot long runway is starting to look awfully short because it has a cliff at the end of it. Mm-hmm. So trying to figure out what I'm going to do. So I start like slipping the airplane sideways, trying to get the airplane slowed down. They're just using the side plate area of the fuselage to slow down. I wasn't too comfortable doing that a whole lot because I didn't know what my airspeed was. I don't know when the airplane's going to snap and catch a wingtip and then a cartwheel. And then best case scenario, I'm in the hospital. And then also, so that was the main consideration there. So now it's, okay, I'm level. I'm going to keep the wings level from here on out. How do I slow the airplane down? I don't have brakes. Right? I don't have anything. I don't have air brakes. I don't have wheel brakes, nothing. So the only thing that you have at your disposal at that point is the bottom of the airplane and friction. So if you come in, and the whole idea is you come in and you just try to hit the belly of the airplane on the bottom of the airplane on the runway, and use that frictional force will take energy away. Every time you impact the runway, it'll take energy away from the airplane. Actually, a sizable amount of energy away from the airplane. So I come down, the airplane skips off the ground once, skips off the ground again, and I could feel it slow down each time. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. It's like, okay, this is working. It's like, okay, I think I have it slow enough. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to touch the back of the belly of the airplane on the ground. As soon as it touches, I'm going to throw the stick forward and try to pin it, kind of like a wheel landing in a tailwheel airplane. And when I did that, I had too much energy. I wasn't as slow as I thought I was. So instead of pinning the airplane, it ricocheted the airplane. And I came up, the photos show probably about 30 to 35 feet in the air and like a 30-degree right bank and like 15 degrees nose up. Some really bad attitude. So at this point, I disappeared behind the hill. They didn't know anything that was going on. And then everybody in the grandstands, all they see is this airplane come up like this and then go back down like this. And then, then from there, I'm still alone, just trying to wrangle the airplane down onto the ground. I get a lot more aggressive about trying to skip it. At one point, both of the canopies departed the airplane. Another point, the windshield shattered and exploded and came in on me. Another point, the instrument panel broke away from the airplane. The EFIS that was in the aircraft actually came out of the panel, hit me in the chest, and landed in the co-pilot footwell. I'm trying to think. And then the battery, the 24-volt battery that's in the back of the airplane, it came loose and was just ricocheting around the inside of the airplane. Really, really violent event. And some things that we found out afterwards was at both, there's 4 engine mount ears that hold this twin turbo, 550-pound twin turbo, 580 cubic inch engine on the front of this airplane. Well, both of the top engine mount ears had broken. And so the only thing, we put safety cables on the engines so that run through the firewall through a different mount, so that if the engine mount breaks for whatever reason, the engine doesn't just depart the airplane. The only thing holding that engine on the airplane right now are those safety cables. And So finally, all this stuff's going on. Finally, I get the airplane slow down. I could actually feel it, kind of like a speedboat. You're up on step. I felt it fall off the step. I'm like, okay, now I know I have it. I'll come in, set the airplane down, stick all the way forward, and then just managing, directional control with the rudder until the airplane slows down. As I'm sliding, screeching to a fiery halt, the first thing I smell is like sanding fiberglass, which I knew the smell of from my days working on airplanes. And then the next thing I smelled was burning fiberglass. So I knew I was on fire. I'm still doing about 60 knots at this point, way too fast to jump out of the airplane. So we had a fire suppression system. I pulled the fire handle. Funny thing about that is, you only have to pull the fire handle about an inch for it to actually activate. That handle's in the back of the airplane. Like I pulled it like I meant it. And finally the airplane comes to a stop. So now it's time to egress the airplane. Egress procedure for a Glass Air 3 is canopy latch open, push the canopy open, belts off, get out of the airplane. Well, remember I said the canopies had departed the airplane. But again, that you practice these procedures and that muscle memory takes over. They talk about your, in training, they talk a lot about your cognitive brain and your lizard brain. And in moments of high stress, your brain goes back to your lizard brain. What have you trained so much that's just innate to your being, right? And this was one of those things. You look back and you can go, I went canopy latch open, pushed the canopy open. There's no canopy there, but that's what I did, just because that's what I had trained so hard, previously on the ground when I wasn't on fire. And then as I'm pulling the belts off, I look over the side, the canopy rail, and the flames are coming up the side of the airplane up to about chest height. Like, okay, it's definitely time to leave. Get the belts off, and I just book it away about 60, 70 yards away from the airplane. And it's
the fastest you've ever run in your life.
Yeah, probably. A friend of mine he was holding short in an L-39 on the other runway. He saw the whole thing happen. He takes off, I salute him as I'm watching our airplane burn to the ground. And I get a text from him about an hour and a half later. It says, the only thing it says is, you run like a girl.
Rude. How rude.
So I text him back, we'll see how you run when your airplane's on fire.
Quite. Oh, my goodness.
See, this is why I was telling you. When Sean was telling this, now a couple of days ago, Sean asked me, well, how do you want me to tell this or whatever? I said, man, this is your story. And one of the things that impressed me about Sean the most was his ability to recount this story and everything that he knew about the systems of the aircraft, how he got it, and what his thought process was during the emergency. He was able to recount this. I would say it was just maybe 2 hours after it happened when we debriefed or something like that.
Something like that. The first thing you do is you give the thumbs up to the CFR guys who are trying to put the fire out. Yeah, I'm okay. I don't need help. One of them comes over. He picks you up in the truck and he's like, all right, do you want to stay here a little bit longer? It's like, no, I don't want to see that thing anymore. So take the parachute off, throw it in the back seat. And then drive over. They dropped me off at my crew and my parents that were there. So it's like, give my parents a hug, give my crew chief a hug. Hey, I'm okay. Yeah, we're good to go. So they go out and start dealing with the airplane. The first thing I do is run to a debrief with sport class leadership, then run to a debrief with RARA, then run to a debrief with the NTSB, then run to a debrief with the FAA, then finally run to a debrief with the sport class as a whole. And then after that, you finally have a chance to get out of your flight suit, which reeks of burning fiberglass. This is the worst smell in the world. And that's like, it was about 2.5 hours, two and a half hours, something like that, before I finally got to the point where I could tell my friends that are in the sport class about it, not just the FAA, which who knows what, how they're going to react to it, which was poorly, but, and then finally be able to get out of it and kind of just decompress for a second and go, grab a drink and shake some hands with good friends and stuff like that.
Yeah. We were the sport class. We were the first place that you could debrief this story with a beer in a hand, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I had, so there's Richard King in the chat room asks, from engine failure to being on the ground, what was that time frame more or less?
It was about 40 seconds.
Yeah.
So that whole story that took me, 5 or 10 minutes to talk happened in 40 seconds.
That's amazing, isn't it?
It's just, I mean, you tell the story and it's one of those, isn't it? The time is, I suppose it's everything must be in slow-mo for you in a situation like that.
I don't know. 155 knots over the fence it's smoking.
It looks like the beginning of Star Wars, where the stars are flying by.
A little bit, like you just see center line. It's like, oh god.
Yeah. So, and we're going to get to some questions from the chat room here in a second, but so this kind of flying, your ability to know these systems and know about energy management, which is something that we talked about. I know it's something that made me get back into books in my day-to-day flying about energy management and kind of getting good. And you know who's best is glider flyers. People that fly gliders know energy management so well. But after that, you went on and you went to test pilot school, right?
Correct. Yep.
And we'll finish that up with the beautiful aircraft sitting behind you.
Do my best Vanna White impersonation here.
Yeah, it is not a virtual background. So actually, I will. One of the questions from the chat room was, well, normally test pilots have a military background. What are the actual qualifications, and how did you end up there?
Yeah, so I do not have a military background. I've been completely civilian trained. A very fortunate series of circumstances and running into really great people that took me under the wing and gave me the on-the-job training that I needed to be successful doing what I'm doing. And it's a very incremental approach. It starts out with, hey, go flight, go get checked out in this airplane. Then B, like, okay, go ferry this airplane around a little bit. Then C, go do some training in this airplane. Go teach other people how to fly the airplane. And then from there is like, after the first initial envelope expansion happens, go out and do some systems flight testing and stuff like that. And then you can work into doing the initial envelope expansion, how, working on taking the airplane from a very limited flight envelope to its entire flight envelope and finding the corners of how the airplane operates. And then finally working back to actually doing first flights on a brand new airplane, something that before was just a pile of parts sitting in somebody's hangar, and then you take it to the air for the first time. You transform that pile of parts into an airplane. And it's kind of incrementally working down that process. There's no, at least in the United States, to work as a test pilot in the civilian sector, there are no formal qualifications on the experimental side. When you start working on the certified side, you have to have what's called a designated engineering representative in flight testing. And that's something that I'm currently working towards right now with the schooling, the education I'm getting at National Test Pilot School, and then also the on-the-job training I'm getting at places like Stratos Aircraft, and working with some really nationally and internationally recognized test pilots that work in the experimental aviation industry. It's just the only way for a civilian to really get into that is it's very happenstance. Like I can't tell anybody this is the path that you take to go do this. The only thing that I can say is go out and fly a ton of different airplanes in a ton of different environments and a ton of different operations. That'll give you a breadth of experience that will maybe land you in the right spot at the right time to meet the right people to go do the right work.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. So, and then that led to you being there at Stratos. So one of the things that we wanted to talk about was the Stratos 716, which you just recently test piloted, right?
Correct. Yep.
And I'm going to preload a question is, test flying an aircraft for the first time ever, what is it that you're actually thinking about, and what kind of planning goes into something like this?
Yeah, the planning. So if we want to talk about the Stratos, so I've done 19 first flights, something like that, of a variety of different experimental aircraft. In terms of first flights on a prototype, the Stratos 716 was the first prototype that I've flown. And it's one thing to go take like an RV6 and go do a first flight on that. It's a very proven design. There's thousands of them flying around. The structure, everything's very well proven, and the aerodynamics have been proven before. Yes, it's a brand new airplane, and this specific one has never flown before, but there's a lot of really good intel around it. You can even go out and fly one, go fly a friend's airplane first and then go jump in and fly for the first time. So you have a really good knowledge of what's going on. To go fly a prototype for the first time it's a different level of preparation for sure. And really where the preparation started for me on this program was about 4 years ago when they started putting this aircraft, the proof of concept airplane, together. And to get the engines for this airplane, the company didn't want to invest in a brand new engine. So they bought, and the engine in this aircraft, both aircraft, is a JT-15D-5. It's the engine that's on typically on Beach Jets and Citation 1s and 2s and stuff like that. So the company actually bought a Beach Jet 400 and to get the engines for this airplane, high time airplane, scrapped the rest of the airplane. It was unairworthy anyways, but the engines were good. And so one of the things that we did is we sat down, we took a look at the Beach Jet manuals, and we said, okay, the engine is the only thing that differentiates an airplane between a glider. It's the thing that makes you go up, right? So we want to understand that thing really, really well. And so we started operating the engine. Fortunately, I had experience from a previous job actually flying corporate in a Citation 2, so I'd operated the engines in the real world a little bit. Came to Stratos, took that experience with me to do a bunch of ground testing with the Beach Jet and figure out the procedures and systems and how the engine operates on the Beach Jet. We were able to transform that knowledge into procedures that work well in the Stratos. From there, it's a matter of sitting down with the engineers and talking through each individual system in the airplane. And how do these systems work? How are they engineered? How are they put together? How are we going to effectively ground test these systems so that we know that they're going to work properly in the air? And then from all of that knowledge, build a procedure that's going to be concise enough for a pilot to understand when their airplane's on fire, but also detailed enough to really understand how the airplane's put together and how it's working. And then from there, you can tease out, and then we flew this airplane. And Dave Morse did the first flight on this airplane. He's another sport class racer. He's done first flights on like 45 prototypes. Like he is the guy that does that for the past several decades. And did an excellent job flying this airplane. We all worked together to help make that happen. And then learning, sitting under him, watching him, and both him and Len Fox do the flight testing on this airplane, then get wrapped into a bunch of the systems testing on it, understanding this aircraft, and then same thing again when they decided to come out with the new prototype 716. What are the similarities and differences? And what are the really big, in this kind of case where a company started with the design, they built another airplane that looks like a very similar, to somebody who knows nothing about aviation, they would say that they're the same airplane. But at their core, we know that they're a completely different aircraft. It's very easy to get wrapped into this trapped thought process of, oh, we already did this once, we're just doing another one, right? It's all the same. And in fact, it's all different. So now you go back to square one. Yes, we now have this larger knowledge base, 220, 230 hours flying this airplane around. All of that is available. It's good experience and good knowledge that will lead to your flying a new airplane. But more specifically, how is this new airplane different than what we're used to? What are the traps that I'm going to work myself into because I think I understand this airplane so well, but I actually don't because I've never flown it. And then building procedures around that, doing ground testing, sitting down with the engineers and the mechanics, helping them put the airplane together, really understanding how the airplane's put together, how all the systems work, being part of the ground testing, making sure that all the systems work properly, and then finally working up to that. Our first flight was 22 minutes long. It's just it's months and months, years of work to get up to this singular event that's so short.
Yeah, and one of our contributors in the chat room, Micah, is talking about, flight testing is completely different nowadays than it was in the 1950s. So with computer modeling, you had an expectation of how it was going to perform, right?
Correct. And a lot of our flight testing, a lot of our modern flight testing is you have a model of the aircraft. This is how the aircraft should operate based on the mathematical model. Then build procedures and systems and build procedures and systems and flows and patterns that fit that model, but have margin around them so that if something isn't inside that model, we can still safely operate the aircraft and get it back on the ground. And then go out and gather data on the airplane, compare that data to the model, and then what are the differences, revise the model to then understand what the airplane actually is so that when we take the aircraft further in its envelope, we have a better expectation of what will actually happen since we've refined the model based on the experience that we have with the airplane. This is all about slowly expanding the envelope of the aircraft. It's back in I remember researching, I think it was the first flight on the F4 Phantom. It's like a 1.5 hour flight or 1 hour 40 minutes, something like that. They took off, they stalled it, they did aerobatics in it, they went to Mach 2 on like the first flight. Like these things would never happen in the 21st century.
Oh, geez. Well, Sean, I want to thank you for talking us through that. We're going to go to some questions from the chat room here in a second. But before I do that, I wanted to just congratulate.
Thank you.
Congratulate Sean, because we had a fantastic guest on the show a couple months ago. That was Miss Jody Ruger, and you guys are now an official couple. So I wanted to congratulate you guys on that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we met at an aerobatic competition of all places about 7 years ago, and it took us about 3 years to kind of find each other from there. But yeah, she's an exceptional woman, an exceptional pilot, a fantastic flight instructor. Flies air shows and is currently on furlough with the airlines, but hopefully we'll get her back flying for the airlines sometime soon. And, it's just thank you very much.
Well, if nothing else, so we like watching her videos that she posts in the pits. So very, very cool. Carlos, did you want to go into some chat room questions?
Oh, blimey, yeah. So I was just engrossed in the conversation there. Actually, one of the things I was going to ask myself, actually, a cheeky question for me, Sean. You know, when you're doing the flight, the actual initial flight test on a brand new aircraft, do you have all the facts and figures in front of you of like the stall speeds and the flap settings and all the bits and pieces, or is it stuff that you learn as you're doing the flight test and you have a kind of pen and pad on your knee and you're writing down all the figures as you're flying?
A little bit of both. So for instance, like I talked about, we have an aerodynamic model of the airplane, and then we're going to go out and test the aircraft to figure out what the airplane actually is and then compare it to that aerodynamic model, either to verify or confirm how good the model is. So based on the model of the airplane and the configuration of the aircraft for the first flight, we have a series of speeds that have speeds and loads and pitch angles and beta angles and all that kind of stuff that with significant margin built into them, and I'll have the basic numbers, very pertinent numbers. What's my approach speed? What's my rotation speed? What speed am I going to climb at? What are the limitations, the basic limitations I need to keep the airplane inside? And I'll have that on my knee board. And then from there, when we take off, we're also noting, in a traditional world, you would sit down, you would note, and when I go do somebody's first flight like a Lancer Legacy, you actually handwrite what the actual speeds are and compare that to what you thought you were going to do and how the airplane was going to perform. In these aircraft, we actually have a very sophisticated data acquisition system that captures all those numbers for us, and then at much higher quality than any pilot could ever do, and then that gets shuffled off to the engineers and they compare and contrast. And then especially when we start getting into performance testing, it's the aircraft is supposed to do X. And so we'll go out and see what the airplane actually does. It's Y, and then compare how X is to Y and how close it is.
Wow. Well, thanks for that, Sean. We're going to move on to questions from the chat room. Yep. So we've got one from Richard Adams. So Richard's asking, how much does it concentrate in the mind when instead of reading the checklist, you are devising and writing it, or at least proving the design limits?
The concentration is very high. It's the nice thing about starting, and I always encourage all my students in an airplane to sit down and write their own checklists. Take the checklist that's written, say, for a Beechcraft Bonanza is something that Beechcraft came up with and their lawyers had to approve, right? It doesn't necessarily make sense. They're very, very, very good, and you need to follow those procedures for sure, because those are the things that will keep you safe, but they don't necessarily make sense in your mind. So to sit down and rewrite the checklist in a flow and a pattern that makes sense to you is really important, because it gives you a way to internalize those procedures. For aircraft like this, we start from square one. Nobody else has ever flown this before. There are no procedures to operate this airplane, but like I talked about, you start with, well, the engine is the same as a Beechjet, so let's start with Beechjet, and you just start gathering all that information, bringing it together, and by the time you get to the point that you actually fly the airplane, you've spent so much time revising checklists, so much time studying systems, that you really have internalized the information. It's part of your being by the time you get into the airplane.
So Tony S. is asking, do test pilots normally have a military background, and what qualifications are required?
Yeah, most test pilots do come from a military background. I'm the outlier in that I don't have any military background. I'm completely civilian trained, and that is possible. Most of the test pilots that you'll find at larger companies like Textron or Piper a lot of those people are kind of groomed up. Originally, they may have been military pilots back in the 50s and 60s, but a lot of those people have been groomed up through the company. I can only really speak to here in the U.S. I don't know about other countries, but there's no formal, like I said, for experimental aircraft, there's no formal certification to be a test pilot. If you're doing flight testing for the furtherance of certification, you have to have what's called a DER, Designated Engineering Representative, and you get that by working under the tutelage of somebody else. So it's all very much on-the-job training. There are places you can go, like National Test Pilot School, which I'm working on my master's in flight test and evaluation down there in Mojave, that civilians and people from other countries can go and get that kind of experience, usually taught by military people as well. Yeah, but no formal requirements, a lot of on-the-job training, a lot of personal study, and yeah, typically military, but we're starting to see a wider range of civilian test pilots in recent years.
Actually, you referenced the 50s there, Sean, and main man Micah, who's in Maine, ironically enough, he says, can you talk about the difference between flying an aircraft for the first time with computer modelling versus what it might have been like without that back in the 1950s?
Yeah, if I could transport myself back to any point in time, it would probably be the late 1950s and early 1960s. I mean, that was the heyday of being a test pilot. The downside to that is they killed a lot of people because they didn't really understand what they were doing. But that's where you come across airports like Edwards Air Force Base in the Mojave Desert. They have runways there that are 15, 20,000 feet long that run off into the desert, and they go for, the dry lake bed there is 20 miles long. So you have a lot of capability to slowly expand. Like, you're not just, in this airplane, we took off and we went flying. Back in those days, obviously there's a huge amount of wind tunnel testing that's done, same thing that's done today. That's, part of how we proof the model between the computer and empirically with the real airplane. How does it function in the wind tunnel? And that tells us a lot about how the airplane is actually going to fly. And obviously they had that information back. The Wright brothers had a wind tunnel. But the other thing, a lot of things that they have is the ability to fly in ground effect, to take a more incremental approach into getting up to actually taking the aircraft flying for the first time.
Another one from main man Micah, going back to your Mayday earlier on. He's asking, he says, if it was such a major crisis in the aircraft, was there any time that you thought it might be a good idea to grab some altitude and bail out since you had a parachute?
No, there were no controllability issues with the airplane. So, had I had a loss of control or, loss of control, seize controls or midair or something like that, yeah, absolutely, I'll bail out. But the aircraft is, perfectly controllable. Whether the engine is running or not doesn't matter. It's a glider. It's a really bad glider, but it is a glider without the engine running. So, and I'm above a runway, so you just go land on the runway. That's all there is to it.
And Richard Adams follows on from that. He said, did you determine the root cause of the original failure?
We did. And the original failure with the landing gear was there's an uplock pin that goes through a slotted hole on the landing gear, and that pin slid. And it's not designed to slide, but it ended up sliding. It ended up failing. And when it slid, the gear came out at 360 or 370 miles an hour or something like that. And it started actually tearing the landing gear open. When it did that, it bent that whole pin and it jammed the uplock. So there was actually no way that we were ever going to get the landing gear down.
Graham Haley says, is there something that you took away from the emergency that you would want to share with other pilots as a kind of lesson learned?
It does. We could sit down and talk about that for hours. I'd say, to summarize a few, you can come up with kind of two or three. One of them that Armando spoke about was systems knowledge. You need to be able to build your airplane inside out. And if you can do that, then your ability to recognize an issue and correct for that issue in the air you have so many more resources available to you. It just to be able to recognize the problem, make a decision in the air based on what's actually going on, what data do you have available to you, and then come up with an action to take. And then it's you end up in that decision-making circle, right? I have a problem, recognize the problem, understand the problem, come up with a solution, implement the solution, and then observe the reaction rate. And you just kind of keep going around and around and around in that circle until finally either really bad things happen or really good things happen. So that's definitely one takeaway. The other takeaway is, another good takeaway is, no matter what happens, and hopefully flight instructors are still saying this, that old adage in aviation: aviate, navigate, communicate, in that order. The most important thing when you're in an airplane is to keep flying the airplane. Never, ever, ever stop flying the airplane. If you have the airplane under control, even if you hit a brick wall, your chances are, if you hit that brick wall straight on and in control, your chances of survival are many, many, many times higher than if you hit anything, even just completely flat ground out of control. So aviate first, then figure out where you are, where you're going, and then talk about it. But just keep flying the airplane. And then the third one is, no matter how experienced you are, no matter how well you know your airplane, no matter how much time you've spent practicing, task saturation is a very real thing. And it's, the human brain only has so much capacity, and that's, I mean, we have to go to sleep every day, right? Your brain needs to rest. And when you end up in a highly stressful environment like that, your mind is going to start getting rid of unimportant information. And eventually you get stressed out enough, whether you recognize it or not, that your brain is starting to get rid of what it deems to be unimportant information that's actually really important information. And to recognize when those things happen and know that for yourself. And that's how you set your personal limitations when you go out to take a flight. Obviously, my personal limitations for a flight are much higher than most, because I fly every day, and I fly some very advanced airplanes and 135 different types or something like that. I have a huge breadth of experience to take from. Somebody who's a private pilot with 50 hours of flight time, their personal limitations should be quite high, and they'll start building experience to bring those limitations back down. But to understand that about yourself, how you make decisions, and what are the things that are going to trigger you to get task saturated is very important.
That's awesome, Sean. Hey, listen, thank you so much for agreeing to come on with us. I wish you the best this year. It's a super shame that we had to cancel Reno, but like I said, I think it was the best thing for them to do. And everybody that's listening, go over to Facebook, check out Havoc Air Racing. Can't wait to see Sean out there next year. Well, hopefully we'll be out there at PRS next June, or maybe this little meetup that we're going to do. But and then also the Stratos jet. I think we were talking before the show. It was at least the 714 was at Oshkosh. It was at Reno. The 716, Sean just talked about his flight. So I can't wait to see what happens with that jet, and make sure you guys go over to the internet and check out those. If you're in the market for a small jet for yourself and your family and your friends. But yeah, Sean,
even if you're not, check it out. Yeah. It's a cool airplane. So
yeah, it's stratosaircraft.com. Guys, Sean, thank you so much for being on.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Cheers, Sean.
We do have, thank you, our producer John in our ear.
Yes.
Because you had the earmuffs on,
yep.
I do have to ask you one final question. Now, you are a test pilot, so it's kind of a funny question to ask a test pilot. But
this is
if money was no object, and you could fly any aircraft in the world, past, present, or future, as you're already doing, what aircraft would that be?
I've been asked this question a lot, actually, and I've narrowed it down to two specific missions, I think. The first one, and I think the one I would choose, is the orbiter. And specifically, like the first test flight that they took to space, that they took into orbit. Just that whole mission, from launching a rocket vertically and then getting into the roll program, going into, getting into orbit, staying in orbit, coming back down out of orbit, turning into a really bad glider, coming down and landing. And to understand, like, that mission is just test point after test point after test point after test point, and you don't have time to go back and redo it. That would have been that vehicle would be absolutely incredible to go fly, just because it's the most complex machine that human beings have ever built. But also, too, just to be a part of that, that specific mission is really would be really incredible. And the other one is the Gemini 6 and Gemini 7 mission, which is not so much aircraft, but the 2 spacecraft, the capsules. And that was the first time that they did orbital rendezvous. So actually, one of the things that we love that we do in sport class and at Reno is fly formation. And formation flying is so much fun, and it's about the most fun you can have in an airplane next to doing aerobatics. Well, that's the first time they flew formation in space. So to figure out, sit down and figure out how to do an orbital rendezvous and then fly formation with another capsule in space, that would have been a really incredible program to be a part of as well.
Tony S. reckons that I'm sure you'd like to barrel roll a 707.
I wouldn't say no to that. I've rolled a lot of airplanes that I probably shouldn't have. But rolling an airplane isn't nearly as special as people think it is, as Tex so aptly showed us. So.
That's right. Awesome test pilot answer right there. The orbiter and the space capsule. That's a first for us as an answer. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome, Sean. I can't wait to see you, buddy.
Thanks. Yeah, it'd be fun we'll have to, hopefully we'll be able to come out and see you out in Reno. Are you coming out in September?
You betcha. I'll be there.
Cool. Yeah, we'll see you there.
All right, my friend.
Cheers. Thanks, Sean, for coming on. It has been awesome to hear your story. So thanks for that, Sean.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for having me, and hopefully we can do it again sometime.
Definitely, anytime you're free. We'll let Armando do the conversations. That's probably the thing. So we'll say goodbye to you, Sean, and we're going to move on to the aviation news. Cheers, Sean. Take care.
Cheers, Sean.
Cheers. See you next time.
He was on the clock.
So we've got some news kind of headline bullet points to go through on this week.
Indeed, and because we're basically what we're going to do is we're going to whiz through it. So in your best CNBC News style voice, please, Carlos.
So headlines are, so we've got the first one here. This is British Airways announced immediate 747 fleet retirement. Incredibly sad, I will say, for that one. And speaking of retirement as well, we spoke about how Qantas were planning on retiring their farewell flights, 3 last week. One of the listeners, Ray Davis, was he was able to actually capture some video of the Sydney flight. He's actually managed to send that video over to us, so thanks for that, Ray. I think Matt's going to play that out.
Yeah, that's playing now.
And next up, this one is Ryanair. Some of you might have seen this one in the news this week. Ryanair, they had a flight that made an emergency landing at Stansted Airport, and 2 people have been arrested for that, over that incident. You probably saw that. That was escorted into Stansted Airport. Another one, this is Virgin Atlantic, and finalising a £1.2 billion rescue deal, which is great. Armando, take number 4. There we go.
This is, we always preach patience, especially in these troubling times. 3 Philadelphia women were charged with assault for attacking Spirit Airline employees over a delayed flight. Something in the arrest records say that the passengers intentionally struck the employees with phones, shoes, water bottles, mailed boarding signs, fast food. Yeah. So
it's a waste of good food, that's what I say.
That's a waste of food, yeah.
That's those toasted paninis.
You're right.
Oh my gosh, these are trying times, and my goodness, I feel bad for these employees, but I can't imagine what situation led to this.
Matt, what's the next one?
No idea. Somebody take that one.
Alaska Airlines flight forced to land when a passenger threatened to kill everyone on board. The video shows a man walking in the aisle and shouting that he would kill everyone on board in the name of Jesus. Not something you want to do on a packed flight.
No.
The arrested man has not been charged with anything, and police are investigating. Armando.
There's a lot of things that you can hit, as Sean was talking about, but apparently a Bluebird Aviation Dash 8 crashed on landing in Somalia with all 3 pilots surviving with minor injuries. Local media is reporting that Bluebird Aviation's general manager, Captain Hussein Mohammed, is saying the plane was from Djibouti earlier this morning, and upon landing, A donkey crossed the runway. They hit the donkey, swerved off into a trench, the side of the runway, but the crew are perfectly okay. That's a lot of damage for a donkey. Oh yeah, the condition of the donkey still not known.
Oh no! Oh really?
Anyway, number 7. This is Nepal Airlines grounds all its Chinese-built aircraft. A bit harsh. So the Nepali airline claims it cannot afford to fly the aircraft, and thus these planes will be grounded for the foreseeable future. Beyond that, the Y-12E aircraft has long been questioned for its functionality and performance. Next one is Matt. We're going over to the Netherlands.
Are we? Yes. Okay. And this is the Netherlands is taking Russia to court over downing of Malaysia Airlines MH17. The Kremlin has consistently denied involvement in this matter.
Next one, Armando. We're going 385.
Yes, 380s. We are still talking about them. And Emirates A380 is to return to the skies with passengers for the first time since March. It's the first time that A380 commercial passenger service that Emirates has operated since March 25th, when flight 262 landed in Dubai from Sao Paulo, Brazil, the day after United Arab Emirates authorities closed the country's airspace. The aircraft operated from London to Paris.
There we are, and that is basically this week's news in a nutshell.
In a nutshell.
Oh, apparently there's a military thing.
Oh, we don't need military. There's great stuff. They're shooting things. They're blowing things up. They're probably ejecting out the tops and I don't know, engine failures and night vision goggles. There you go. Military.
Right.
Complete.
Okay. Oh, well, do you know, efficient as ever, my friend. And
all comments to Armando at planetalkinguk.com.
Yeah, all incoming clues.
To Jonathan Warner, I'll write you a personal email with some military news here in a little bit.
Quite, absolutely. One more bit of housekeeping, if that's all right, then, Carlos, because you and I'm joining your social bubble as of tomorrow, and we're off somewhere a bit special, aren't we?
I know. This is amazing. Anyone who's listening to the show live now and is off to the Shuttleworth Air Show tomorrow, me and Matt are going to actually be there. We are actually going to say the words, "We're at an air show." Yes. So me and Matt are off to the Shuttleworth Air Show tomorrow. We have our passes. We actually got sent through some very nice, shiny media press passes. So hopefully we'll have our own little VIP area somewhere near the front of the flight line to take some great footage, videos, and pictures to bring to you in a future show.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Hopefully that'll be good.
That's going to be good. And also, you were saying actually, because obviously there is no Oshkosh this year, but you were listening, I think, to the Airplane Geeks, and they were saying that they're doing like a
virtual Oshkosh. Yeah, I know we had an air show in the UK, didn't we, Matt? Not too many weeks ago, didn't we? That was a kind of virtual air show, and Oshkosh going to be doing the same kind of thing. So it might pay for if you go and check out the links, just type in and search for Oshkosh, and I think all the details are on their website for their virtual show. So that should be really good. And EAA Spirit of Aviation Virtual Expo events, 21st to 25th of July. You can check that out at allaws.eaatogether.org/.
Question. Yeah, I don't know what the question is. But yeah, well, just go to eattogether.org. I think that's probably your best bet. I don't know what's happened there. Now, Armando, obviously there was some sad news just outside Houston this week, but we're going to cover that in a little bit more detail next week.
Yeah, that's right. I think the NTSB just had their hearing this week about the final results of the crashed Atlas 3591 outside of Houston. So we're sort of digesting that. We're going to talk to some experts with that mishap, and we'll go into in a little bit more in depth next week about it.
Absolutely. Okay. So we'll look forward to that, get a bit of an update. And Carlos, just go. Graham Haley in the chat room is saying there's also a virtual RIAT this weekend too. Don't have the details to hand there, but obviously I'm sure a quick Google search will put that right. If not, I'll make sure that they are in the show notes. So thanks for that, Graham.
Worth noting quickly that Jonathan Warner will be with us tomorrow as well, hopefully, all being well, at Shuttleworth. So that's good. Yeah. Social media links links then, if you didn't already know, social media links, you can send us a picture, audio, text, or a video to our WhatsApp number, +44 757 224 9166. And also you can contact us on our email address, podcast@planetalkinguk.com. Take yourselves over to our website, all the w's.planetalkinguk.com.
New website been released.
We have got a brand spanking new website. If you haven't seen it yet, take yourselves over to the website. You'll absolutely love it. Matt has put an absolute epic effort into the website, and it looks stunning. And also on the note of that as well, if you haven't already got yourself a PTUK t-shirt, I know 3 have been purchased this week already. We have got some fresh, new, shiny PTUK t-shirts that have come straight from our printers and our embroiderers. So you can grab yourself a nice, shiny, it's a Gildan, very nice, soft cotton, 100% cotton t-shirt with the PTUK logo embroidered on the front. Take yourselves over to the shop on the website. You can grab yourself one there. Also, if you're going to do your shopping, as I have done only twice this week, I'm sorry, Matt, through Amazon, you can go through the Amazon link on our website and do your shopping via our link. That'd be awesome. And if you aren't already, and if you want to join and help the show and help produce some of the massive, great content that we have, including this week, because this week's been an epic show, you can become a Patreon of the show. So take yourselves over to our website. The Patreon link is on there, and you can also donate through the PayPal button. We absolutely love you for that. So there we go, as all the social media links.
Certainly is.
So it's been a fantastic show. I'm going to have to say a massive thanks to both our guests, Ariel and Sean, for coming on the show again. And also a big thanks to Armando and Matt for all their hard work on the show this evening. And as well, not forgetting our producer, John, for all the work he does as well during the week. So a big round of applause for John.
Yeah, with the social media links for our guests, by the way. So it's at Ariel Tweto, ARIELTWETO. It's obviously many of the websites that she plugs, www.poppingbubbles.org, fnx.org/watch/show/native shorts. IntoAmericasWild.com is one of the websites, and fox.com/The Great North, I think, was the cartoon that she was talking about. Obviously, Sean Van Hatten. Take yourself to Facebook and search for Havoc Air Racing again, and it's the airplane he was talking about that he had behind him was the StratosAircraft.com partner program. Obviously, all those links will be in the show notes, so if you missed any of that, you'll find it at the bottom of wherever it is that you're listening to today's show.
So big thanks to everyone who's joined us in the YouTube chat room this evening. Thank you to everyone who's joined us tonight. Well, I hope you've enjoyed tonight's show. It's been absolutely fantastic. And thanks as well to everyone who downloads the show as an audio podcast each week through all the relevant audio podcast platforms. So that's it. We're going to wrap up tonight's show, episode number 327.
That's the one, yeah.
Scrolling up to the top of the list there.
We're just clicking away at it,
I know. It's multitasking for you.
Indeed.
So have a great weekend, everyone. So from me, Carlos, here in my studio, from Matt over in the PTUK main studios, and from Armando over in his Charlotte studios. Have a safe and great weekend, everyone. Take care.
Take care,
goodbye.
everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.